Kitten Features, and you're listening to ShowX Live with Ken in a student accommodation all the way in Scotland, and Wade in his white windowless van? Uh-oh, I better get out of here. Enjoy the show!
There we go. Haha. Hey everybody, welcome to ShowX on VtWProductions.com. You're listening live at 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. GMT on this Sunday, the 12th of May, 2019. And for those of us here in the States, a quick and upfront Happy Mother's Day for all of our mums out in the world. We appreciate you and thank you for birthing us and doing the deed. I know, it sounds bad. So the challenge is that introduction took a moment to translate over, is mostly because I have taken Hando's advice and others out there in the community to look at using the Streamlabs version of OBS. And so I think I've got things set up. It looks, let's see, it looks like we're streaming and most things are working. There's a few kinks I still need to work out of it. One of the challenges I had is in my Stream Deck, where I actually control the scenes, hitting the buttons to switch scenes didn't push it directly into the stream. It went into my edit window, but not the live, and so there's a piece there I'm going to have to figure out to make sure when I push a button, it goes straight to the scene I mean it to. And so little bits still to figure out, but overall, I'd say it's nice. I do like also, and hopefully the quality is going to look better for all of you out, as this versus the OBS generic one when it did its like figure out the best streaming options and the speeds and bandwidth and everything to use, is doing a much more aggressive than what I've used in the past. This is actually running at probably twice the bit rate that I was running before, but it's not hiccuping. So we'll see how that works. I think in the past the challenge has been whether you could see me on, because I think it was actually the restream that I'm using to go to both YouTube and to Twitch at the same time that was having hiccups with it. But it seems to be fairly happy at the moment, so we'll see. But yeah, so you should be catching us at 60 frames per second now and like a much higher bit rate. So hopefully we look pretty. Prettier, yes. Prettier than we would normally look, of course, our wonderful selves. So, for those who did not catch it ahead of time, you should be aware. But we are planning to be talking, spoiling, doing a whole lot of things with everything Avengers today, because we are past the official moratorium or whatever on not talking spoilers, not talking story and stuff, where we were just doing bits. And so now it is absolutely talking as much as we want. So with that in mind, we'll start off the show like we normally do, talk a little bit about dysfunctional deviations, things like that with us, but giving you a heads up that when we do start talking, we'll put up the spoilers banner and all that. At the same time, if you would like to jump in and talk to us live on Skype on the show about your opinions of Avengers Endgame or what you've had seen, thought, otherwise with it, feel free to warm up your Skypes and friend us on VtW shows on Skype, and we will bring you into the mix. If you're not afraid to be seen, go ahead and bring on your video as well, and that way everyone else in the world can see ya. So with that, we're happy to chat in the live chat as well, but just know that that is coming. So with that, let's go ahead and kick things off with a little bit of
Dysfunctional Deviations.
Oh, so Ken, what have you been up to this week that's been not geeky and such? We'll keep it short because we're going to talk Endgame as a whole.
Sure. One thing I need to bring up before we really start Dysfunctional Deviations.
Yes.
We've also got our competition running. So I just want to give a shout out to that. So if you go to our latest tweet on Twitter, of course, and you retweet it, you will be automatically entered into our games giveaway. Today we will give away, let's see, how about Shadow of Mordor for PC? We will give away Shadow of Mordor. So if you want to come take part, just retweet us on Twitter. That's all you need to do. That's it. Then make sure you also follow that account so that we can private message you the key at the end of the show. And we will do that at the end of the show. We may announce the winners halfway through, then we'll send out the keys potentially after the show. Okay?
I'm gonna have to play with because one of the things that is in This Streamlabs version of OBS is, I believe, well, Streamlabs itself has an ability to do contests and things, like directly in it.
Oh, cool.
So I should probably look at trying to set that up and see how that works. Because I believe...
I wonder if we could do, like, people who rehost us or something on Twitch. That would also be good.
That'd be a good one as well. So yeah,
I think about that in the future.
I need to play with this more, but that is something that's like, hey, cool. I will have to play around as I learn more about this feature. But cool. So yes, everybody, feel free to retweet us now so that we can check at the break to see who we are going to gift out the game for helping send us out there and helping us grow our audience and sharing us with your friends and such. So thank you.
Indeed. All right. So so the first thing I have on my list is to never mind Mother's Day. American Mother's Day doesn't really exist. Fake Mother's Day. We have a real holiday that is definitely worth celebrating, which is on Tuesday. It was Mr. Wayne's 25th birthday.
Yeah.
And as such, I have
nothing
here.
Oh no!
Since I am not going to, I don't have the beautiful singing voice of Mr. Wayne, so I have to do something a little bit different. So prepare yourselves. I'm glad we don't have background music, so it won't ruin it.
As
and
I
I haven't
say,
practiced this.
Oh, I feel bad for everybody already.
Yeah. Me too. Me too. Okay, let us begin. Wait. I know what I'm doing.
You're so close. You're so close.
Hey!
Oh, that was good, Ken.
Objective complete.
Was not expecting
Happy
that.
birthday, sir.
Thank you for that, sir. Oh, it is funny because one of the things I was going to bring up in general was just a thank you to those who have sent gifts my way for the birthday wishes, and I appreciate that. I always say it's a good thing to keep your wish list populated when it comes to everything from Amazon, honestly, because even my folks had asked me like, hey, what do you want? And I was kind of like, the usual challenge of having a decent job and generally geeking out and stuff throughout the year is you tend to buy the things you want when you want.
Yeah.
And then the things that are expensive and you want to save up for are the things that you don't get right away. And so it's kind of hard to tell somebody, well, what I really want is this, $3,000 camera body I've been looking at. Hey, folks. That's not necessarily for me the appropriate gift to ask for someone.
No,
so,
probably not. Maybe asking like your wife if
it was something and it was right. So for me though, I have my Steam wish list. I try to keep up to date whenever I see games come out. They're like, oh, I would love to have that, as well as my Amazon. What I try to do is not only put in the things that I'm actively buying, but on the wish list, I'll put everything from crazy extravagant. One day, if I win the lottery, here's things that I will buy. To, yeah, I want this. I have no reason to buy it right now because if I checked out, I'd have like $1,000 in my checkout type thing in my basket. But I'll just put it here, put it here, put it here, kind of thing, right? And so then when it does come together, it's an opportunity for me to share that wish list with people that want it and say, hey, anything off this list you could buy me, and I would be genuinely excited and happy to get.
Yeah, right.
So because they're all on my list of to buys at some point.
So I have a funny opinion that apparently is quite controversial when it comes to birthdays and such. I'm of the opinion that you should buy people things they want.
Well, so it's interesting because I actually had a fairly in-depth discussion about this come my birthday and some recent ones that have happened. Because I was talking actually I won't name names so that they don't go back onto who their spouse is that they complained of, that their spouse is just horrible about gifting, as well as not just their spouse, but like their whole spouse's family. So their in-laws and stuff like that are just terrible. I think this is a common issue
across the world, right? I think this is not an uncommon thing.
I've always unless I've been wrong, I've kind of felt that I do a decent job in gifting things. But the reason being is that I've always paid attention to either what kind of things people enjoy, be it certain characters, IPs, whatever it might be like that, or when I have been with someone at some period of time, and I'd gone shopping with them, friends, significant others, whatever it might be, I've looked at and said like, oh, here's a thing that you paid attention on the shelf that you're like, oh, I'd love to have this, but it doesn't make sense for me to buy, right? It'd be irresponsible. And I keep those things in my head. Is like, okay, this isn't something you can buy now, or you don't feel justified to buy now because it's not, the responsible thing to do. But if I were to buy it for you for a gift, you'd be happy. And so I've always felt like I'm decent at gift giving, personally. But
so I had one other gift that I was thinking of giving you. So one was obviously the obvious backup for if you're ever struggling to get somebody a gift, especially when it's international, something online, right? Just anything in their Steam library, I think is much easier. I've been trying to do more physical items with you in the past because I know that you've got a backlog of games, so I did feel bad buying you a game on Steam.
Oh, don't, because those are games, admittedly, that I put into my favorites list as to the next ones that I will play outside of League of Legends. They're on my list to install and do. And because not only did you give me a game, but also Tom Bad Guy did as well. And both the games that I received were ones that are on my, like, I really do want these game list. And so I was super excited to get them.
That's good. But what I wanted to get you was something that I've been playing with that I got for my own birthday, 7 months ago or whatever.
The Sphere?
But I don't. Yeah, the crystal ball. I wasn't sure if you had one or not. That's
I
what
don't.
I was going to ask you last week,
don't, and I only say it because I know you just posted a picture with one. And such. And so I saw that was like,
it's been
I
fun.
wonder.
It's a very useful tool in photography when you have a photo that you want to take of something and you're like, oh, it's kind of boring. You just do it through a crystal ball. Suddenly it's like, oh, it's a kind of interesting photo now, and you can take photo of the subject you wanted, but it just adds something,
It does.
So it's pretty good. It's pretty good for that. Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Oh, and that's and I don't think I put one of those on my wish list yet because I was kind of like, boom. I
should.
My challenge is I'm stuck in this photography thing because I have my old body. I need to either get my 7D fixed or I need to get I need to go get what I've been looking at, the A7 III Mark III, the Sony mirrorless, because that thing's bad arse. It's just getting long in the tooth. And I feel like it's about time for Sony to release a new mirrorless, since when it still levels itself well against the newer ones from Nikon, Panasonic, and other groups like that. And so it's kind of like, do I wait till something new comes out? But I have a wedding to shoot coming up in the fall. And I'd like a better body than my 20D by that time. Something I can count on. And man, that Sony mirrorless autofocus system looks so good. If they released an A7 IV right now, I'd probably put it on the top of my list. I'd wait for reviews, but that would be like the, yep, I'm going to find a way to finance that because that's going to be my go-to at that point. And I'll get a Canon adapter and start playing with Sony's. So that's
that's cool, dude. But if it does come worse to worse, and you don't decide to buy anything by the time of the wedding, I mean, I have a friend who's got a quite nice camera, and this week she sent me a couple of photos that she took, and I was like, oh my god, those are the best photos you've ever taken. Like, I legitimately think they're the best photos you have taken yet. I love them. And she said, I took those on my phone.
Yeah,
but
like, show me the person who's going to officially get paid to shoot a wedding on their phone.
True.
That would be a bit of a stretch, in my opinion. Like,
although I have seen wedding photographers go and take their phone out to take some photos sometimes.
Oh, well, so normally the reason I see, or that while I'm shooting other things that I will use my phone, is because it's a way to very quickly get something to capture and then to be able to just share, right? To put it on social media, to share it with that person's group, where you can kind of do it right next to the photo you just took, right? You can take the nice high-definition photo and take the quick one and let that go, and then go and edit and have the solid, like, legit photo for your camera later.
That's the thing with weddings, though, right? And I get it. I've been the recipient of this. When you have the photos taken of the special day, you want to see them the next day. You want to see them that evening, right? So, like, it's a right pain when you realize it takes a month, 2, 3, 6, right, to get the edits
forever.
back.
Yes. Oh God.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I think having somebody go around with a phone, at least one person, is a great idea. Especially if they just trail the photographer. So if the photographer has somebody who's helping like carry lenses around or something, and has like an apprentice photographer or whatever, and just has them take a few photos on the phone, so that they can do a quick edit on Snapseed or something, and then send it off, is a great idea. But anyway, that was a long tangent. We haven't even got into what we wanted to talk about for this. And said we'd be quick.
But still, it's a good thing. All right, so let's see.
So happy birthday to you, sir. I hope you had a
Thank you.
good one.
I worked and then I trained because I am still in the mode where I am trying to get ready for what's now going to come up this Friday for my testing in martial arts to become a Sandan, to see if I can evaluate towards my 3rd degree black belt. And there is a lot of, I don't know, pressure that goes along with the whole process of getting ready for this. It is sooner than normally people would test for something like this, by about 6 to 8 months, and so there's a lot of soak time there that I wish I had had, but it's an opportunity locally to try to do this, and so we're going for it.
Dude. Like, and the worst comes worst, you come out more trained and probably in a better shape.
Well,
actually,
you
as well,
get
because you
evaluation.
get a lot of training.
Yeah, the evaluation would, if nothing else, tell me what I need to work on for next. There's a challenge there because there's a financial investment in it, and so there's a little bit of like, I have spent this much money that I hope that I can perform at a high enough level to also earn the belt. But in doing so, the past month has been this accelerated or accentuated amount of training that my group has been doing. Traveling up to Boulder to do training every weekend and then training more often during the week, to a point where I actually need to take it somewhat light this week because my knees are feeling it, because a lot of what I'm doing for training requires squatting constantly, always with bent legs. And in doing so, it's kind of like, oi, that's going. Wait. Oh, I missed that from Rekitten about what I was drinking. I suppose I'm having a diet Dr. Pepper and one of my favorite rums mixed together as for my drink.
I assumed it was rum, but I didn't want to make an assumption, so I said X. Right.
Well, and so this is going with still being somewhat keto in the sense that it's no calorie sugar type thing, but
that makes
as
sense.
I've broken it throughout the weekend doing other events. But
dude, I get it. I think if you drink socially fairly frequently or otherwise, it's a surprising amount of calories in drink. So if you can just put it down to a diet, or preferably, I would. Okay, this probably wouldn't be good for keto because it still has a lot of calories. But I would argue it's healthier to have apple juice or orange juice or some kind of fruit juice mixer.
So often what I'll do is, if I can find the right flavor, is one of those waters with kind of the flavored mix that you can get that's no calorie.
Those are great, by the way.
And mix that, but it's kind of hard to find the right blend to go with alcohol, because the nice thing is most alcohol, and as Babs is saying, my brother's saying about appreciating whiskey, most actual liquors have very few calories, very little sugar. And so even rum that's based on sugar by itself doesn't hit high on the keto scale. And so it's not so terrible. So there's a lot you can do. I found the best
one when I was doing my weight loss journey last year. I managed to lose 1.5 stone in a month. I found that having a vodka and Diet Coke was a good drink to go with, because it was something like 18 calories for a drink, which is mad, right? That's only 18 more than water, right?
Yep. No, so there are ways to manage it. It's just, but it's being aware. So this isn't my first time through this setup, and so, it's just me managing it, and it's fine. So yeah, although I did do some less well-managed things for my birthday and things like that, because I did cheat a bit and have some pie and stuff like that.
Good for you. You deserve to cheat on your birthday.
So a little bit.
I think you're supposed to. Also, while we're on the topic, shout out to Rekitten, who has been giving us shout-outs on Instagram and stuff.
Yeah, so, we appreciate it.
Check out Rekitten. Let me find the exact Instagram handle so that we don't. So it's Rekitten137. Check her out on Instagram there, and you can see her in the chat there. She's also on Twitch as Rekitten137 as well. So check her out. She does a bunch of streaming and stuff, and tells interesting things on her Instagram. So go check all that out. All right. So other than the happy birthday stuff, I spent most of my so on Friday I had a colleague approach me, who very kindly at the start of the year let me take up 50% of teaching on this module, which meant that basically it was a huge chunk of income, right, in exchange for lots of my hours. But it was well worth it. I was like, fantastic, thank you so much. So on Friday, he approached me and said, hey, would you be willing to help out with the exam marking? And I sort of looked at him and said, how much marking? Because the way that things are, I don't need to go into the details, but basically the position that I currently hold job-wise comes with a contractual requirement that I can't be paid for other things at the same establishment.
Okay.
Which means that the research work I do is all I can get paid by the uni for. So when I got asked to do this marking and he told me how much it was, I was like, that's like 8 to 12 hours. And he asked me to do it over the weekend by Monday. And I knew that I had stuff on all weekend, so I was like,
Ooh.
I can squeeze it in. I'll do it, sure, because that guy did go out of his way to help me, and I didn't want to say no to him after he's been so kind to let me have any income at all. It just sucks because I knew that'd be like a few £100, right?
Okay.
So it's kind of like saying, geez, and giving away a lot of my weekend. I mean, it's not as if it's time that I would be spending, doing enjoyable things like this. It's time that I would spend doing normal research, normal work. So I had to kind of sacrifice that, which is the hard thing.
Okay.
So I spent most of my weekend doing exam marking, and I'm not going to go. I can't talk any details about the actual exams. However, I did have a couple of funny quotes that are completely out of context and anonymized. Let me actually pull them up. I'd show you the handwriting, but I feel like that's a step too far. But I put them aside because I thought it was quite amusing. Let me just find the image here. Here it is. Okay, so the first one is too complex, and the second one has a swear in it. So the student swore in one of the exams. I think it's a typo. I think it was.
Uh-oh.
I think we misspelled the word should. Because it basically says you should to do well, which still doesn't make sense. But the word should starts with an SH. That was a bit strange. I've had a few ones like that. They're just like, did they just swear at me in the exam? Which is pretty funny. So that was most of my weekend was spending marking. Tomorrow I've got this big meeting thing, and I'm kind of nervous about it because I think I mentioned the other week that I was on the train and I met this guy from a company and we made a sort of connection, and he was interested in doing some research or getting us to do some research for the company.
Okay.
So me and my supervisor and one of our colleagues is we're going to go visit this workplace tomorrow and to see his employees and talk to him about a potential partnership and stuff. And it's kind of a big deal for me because I'm just a student. I'm technically a student, and I'm not quite at this stage where I should be saying these kind of relationships. But the fact that I set up is a big deal for my career if it goes well, because it means that I've done something that I should be doing in 3 or 4 years' time, career-wise, but I'm doing now looks very good, right?
Okay.
And it would mean that I could potentially get funding out of it or something, which could be very good for the university. So
nice.
I'm hoping it goes well, but so wish me luck with that. It's I've got to do a good first impression type thing. I might even wear a suit.
What?
That's how crazy it is, right? Also, I might not be on next week, and maybe not the week after. We're going to see because. In 8 days' time, I'm going down to Ipswich, so it's like 7 days' time. I might have to spend the evening with kitten features because I'd feel bad if I didn't.
That makes sense.
Same with the weekend after, so we'll see. I'll keep you updated though. So are we going to do Geek Cred, or are we going to go straight into Avengers after this?
So I mean, if we can kind of just blend the two, I figure, and just knock it out.
Okay.
That we don't need to necessarily spend the whole time on. Because
all I wanted to say was I've done a bunch of photography then. So if you want to check me out, I tried hashtagging. I don't ever hashtag, right? But I've been trying to get.
That's how you find things,
a bit
man.
More of an audience. Yeah, I mean, I do all this photography and stuff. I should really try to actually expand slightly.
Dude, your photography is great. I keep telling you. In fact, I talked about your photography yesterday. I was at a party and I talked about it and was kind of saying how well you do, and I don't think you appreciate nearly enough the quality of your work and how you need to have it out there for others to experience. And so yes, do more with it.
I can be found on Instagram. That's probably the best place to share these days. I also have DeviantArt, Guru Shots, and Facebook page, but I don't think people check those things anymore. So I'm just going to link my Instagram there.
Guru Shots is for other photographers to make comments. Instagram is really where it's out there, and what else would I say? Deviant is kind of just a throwback to every once in a while if you want to just, I don't know, get some clicks, see what people might think in general, you might throw it there, but it's not really a platform I would rely on.
No, I find the only place so far that I've managed to get... Well, I suppose Guru Shots is good for getting a lot of people to see your stuff. I mean, some of my photos have had tens of thousands of likes there. Which is cool.
It's also, as I was telling someone the other day, another photographer friend, it's kind of like a peer review site in that it is focused on actual other photographers and what they think. versus just fans of stuff and things. So there's a point
Well,
to that I think is valuable.
it's a peer review system, but sheerly through voting, not through any comments. You won't actually get any actual feedback back.
Yeah. It's just, did people like it or not?
Yeah. And plus, it depends on competition themes and such. So yeah, it's kind of satisfying to get that serotonin dump in your brain when you see all the votes coming through. But it's not actually particularly fruitful, I don't think. Other than that, so I think Instagram's a bit better because people will actually follow you and stuff. And since there's a feed on Instagram, people will see your stuff if they follow you when you post it. Whereas on Guru Shots, when you upload your stuff, until it's submitted to a competition, and even then, it's only seen as a passing thing. So I don't know. There's ups and downs to each approach. But go check out my stuff. I'm quite proud of the photos I've been taking recently. I myself can see an improvement, and I don't think it's necessarily it is partly an improvement in my photography, but I think it's largely an improvement on my editing skills. I've been doing some tutorials for Lightroom, which is basically Photoshop minus the photoshopping, if you know what I mean, for anybody who doesn't really get that.
Lightroom's like the quicker workflow version of
it's where you do
Photoshop.
color correction, shadow correction, that kind of thing for photos, without doing the can you get rid of my zits, and can you make, I don't know, can you add this guy to the image? Like, you don't do anything like that. It's really just playing with the image as a general whole, rather than individual pieces of the image, if you know what I mean. So I've been improving in my editing skills a fair bit, I think, and I'm quite proud of that. Okay, that's everything I had to say. So, sir, please take the reins.
All right. Well, so just my little bit of geek cred that I was going to throw on there as well is that, hey, I did more and got my server more populated. In fact, let's see. I can share. What, did I have it up there already? This is more for the what do I want to say? The Kuros in the room or the Babs in the room, if they want to actually any care to see what it is that I'm currently running. In that I'm just kind of happy that it's at least active, and I'm slowly trying to figure out what to do with it. But with this, and let's see if this will work. Boom. Even so, the chat will be over. This is kind of an interesting thing for how I'm doing this, but this is my excuse me, my FreeNAS setup. I think it's all my local IP, so people can't really do anything with it. But one of the main things I was going to show there is my disks that I have active here, where I have 2 main RAIDs running, each with 4 disks, 3 main data disks, and a cache disk to hopefully increase performance. The cache disks are each half terabyte, so 500 gig SAS drives running at 15,000 RPM, I believe. And then the regular platter drives, they're a bit smaller, where they're each one, like on one of mine, they're each running at basically 5 terabyte, and the other one is running at 6 terabyte drives, essentially. And so showing how much overall space I have between the two makes me very happy, because it's redundant RAID 5 storage, and so I've got on my regular media where I share videos and things like that through Plex, I now have a Plex server running on my server, separate from my computer, which I was running it. And that's got essentially a 10-ish terabyte RAID that I can now fill. And the photo one that I have backed up of every photo I've taken for people over the years has about a 12 terabyte RAID in there, a little smaller than that, but of usable space. Because it's a RAID 5, so one of those drives is definitely for redundancy. And it's funny because the available that it's showing is not accurate, actually, but it's how much it is. And I love that it monitors on a system using FreeNAS, and the servers, that is the temperature of the drives, which are running nice and cool, and general usage and things like that, which is really neat. So I'm pretty excited that I finally got that put together, and now it's a level of me wanting to figure out how to best utilize it. So I'm just after a lot of effort and work, and it's funny because I have a whole nother JBOD that can hold, I think it's an additional 16 drives or something that I'm not even touching yet. So if anybody wants to donate to the VTW Clause or Death's House Productions and such, a bunch of 10 terabyte or larger hard drives, NAS drives, feel free. I will utilize them. And it's bad too, because now the throughput, I've been able to see ranges of between drives clusters as I was copying 200 megabyte per second sustained writes between platter drives, which is kind of nice. And I'm really looking forward or looking out as to ways that I can build a 10 gigabit E network between my server and my main computer so that I can actually do them back and forth. So Kuro, yes, I was going to initially plan to use SSDs for cache. I haven't yet because I basically, in one of my random purchases, trying to build out the network and such, I have I was given a bunch of SAS drives, a bunch of 15,000 RPM SAS drives that were part of it. So I figured I would just reutilize those, and I'm using a couple of my, because what's also in there, my overall array that I'm still figuring out is I do have four SSDs running. One is the boot drive. One is going to be hopefully my Steam cache, and then a couple others. And so figuring out some things like that. And yeah, I'm looking at a bunch of used hardware to make it work out as a almost enterprise level 10 gig E network where I could run fiber to my office and silly things like that to have connections. Why not?
Awesome.
God, I so want to.
It's cool.
I mean, it's bad because I've been looking at a lot of like eBay sales where, a lot of people just use this other gig switch, which is like a 24 port gig switch, but it has four what are they, SFP slots on it that run at 10 gig. And what you can do is run two of those slots as like your uplink between either your main router or other switches, but the other two you can actually run kind of as an internal switch and control two direct 10 gig E connections and have them link so that I could run my server through one of them and the other one out to my computer, and then still have the rest of the ports reach into the SAS or into the NAS through the 10 gig E bridge throughout that switch. So little things like that, I'm just like, mwah. As well as now that I have the storage, I'm happy to start adding hard drives, and I really want to get this like cluster thing between Hey Babs and myself for my family where we have two different sets of big NASs that we can redundantly store each other's data and have like offsite backup for each other so that my whole family could take advantage of the media that we store and all the photos we take and things like that, all encrypted and stuff. So I have ideas for that. But anyhow, I'm just happy because it's actually all working now for the fumbling I did getting through it.
That's awesome, dude. So total side note here, but you're talking about this idea of having this like enterprise level server available for your house, and I was thinking like this is a thought I've had for a long time, and I wonder if it's some sort of tribal element of my mind that brings me to this concept. But you know how it's a very hippie-ish thing to have a commune, right? I personally see that more of like a tribal thing that's kind of changed with society over time. But I love the idea of having like a bunch of geeks and nerds, not in a commune. I'm not talking about any like weird polygamy stuff going on, right? Nothing to do with anything like that. I just mean like a bunch of houses near each other. They're fairly nice. Maybe you buy the land and build the houses, and then together you have like a lump sum of tax or like rent or mortgages or whatever, and bills that you pay together. But you can have like a I don't know, a 10 gig down from the ISP to your little like cluster of 10 homes. And you can have like big like I don't know, meals together occasionally, but overall it's still like 10 separate households, but they reap the benefits of it being a small community. And maybe like if it's really, really close friends and maybe some family or whatever, you really could like lump together and be more communist with income and stuff, I guess. But that's all secondary. The main thing would just be like a place that could, where it's acceptable to have that kind of network coming in and doable financially. And potentially even, you could give a good reason to the ISP to do it, which is we will pay. We're here for life. If you give us this 10 gig down, we will be your customer forevermore, right, or something like that. That'd be really cool. But I don't know, just a silly idea. I'm not so into the hippie side of it. I don't really care about that, right? It's just the.
Well, one of the things I've seen with it, and I've talked about before, is almost like me wanting to run my own ISP. Any way that I can incorporate bringing fiber to the house and offsetting the cost. Honestly, if any company, and I'm a big fan still, if Google were to still expand, bring fiber to my damn home so I can get, 1 gig synchronous up and down, and then I would host so many things on my server. I would get business class, and I would totally allow like other people to store things as mine being a minor cloud solution that's way cheaper than what all the cloud things out there are doing, because it would only be a handful of people, right? And so basically I would have everybody invest in part of the hard drive networks and such, and then just keep that active and give everybody a few terabytes of storage offsite from them, but not have to pay the $5 a month to much higher when you do NAS storage elsewhere and things like that. And for that, that's funny. Kitten just, or was it Re-Kitten just throws in there that I have to designate because it's not your kitten. Rekitten
know,
throws in
right?
there about the next Game Fest, and actually, I'm just starting to throw out the invites. I did it like last night or the night before, slowly trying to build out the list of who I'm inviting. Is going to be next month on the 14th going forward, that weekend. So that is next Game Fest. Anyhow, let's see. What else I was going to put? I just did a retweet myself to make sure people know because we are about to start talking about some Endgame things, and I wanted to give everyone that opportunity. The last notes I was going to bring...
That's very important, guys. We are talking Endgame. This is spoiler.
Avengers Endgame!
So
We've been...
Don't leave this running if you don't want to hear.
Chomping at the bit to talk about this, so we are warning everybody ahead of time. So a reminder that we are going to be doing that here shortly. As soon as we finish up with the little bit of subject we have. So other than that, what else did I have that was geek and such? I might have forgotten. I was going to talk about in general. I've made progress on my costuming. I made a hat. And so people who've been following my Predictably Ham Instagram, you've seen me post a lot of pictures of my progress for my KDA Akali costume that I'm working on. I most recently did a hand embroidery, not hand like just needle and thread in my hand, but using a sewing machine that is not built for embroidery, putting the right foot on it to allow me to freely move my thing below it, and I just basically and started doing the work, and I was pretty happy with the results. You can check it out on my Predictably Ham page on Instagram to see everything I'm building with Kali, and hopefully it'll debut here in all of a week and a half, or just over, as I will be flying up to Anime North for that. Another reminder with that, I will not be available for the show this coming Sunday, so can feel free, because I'll be doing martial arty things, and the weekend after I hope to be when up in Canada, so we'll see how that all works. So
we might end up canceling next week's show, but we'll see.
Yep, that or gaming night or whatever you guys plan on doing, but I won't be hosting it for darn sure. All right. So I think that's all I really wanted to talk about before we get into this. Anything else on your end, Ken?
Nope, I'm ready to go.
All righty then. So with that, I will hit the magic button. Although I still have to hit transition. Like I said, I got to figure that out. And we are going into official spoiler warning. In fact, I should really have the drop-in that I haven't brought back in here yet. Nope, it's not in there. I should have the total Pottergate drop-in from back in the day to play along with it when I hit spoiler warning. And do the dun-dun-dun-dun Pottergate. So, hey everybody. Have you gone out there and by any chance have you watched a movie recently that was maybe the culmination of quite a bit of, what would you say? I don't know. Comic book lore coming together in one place for all the geeks to enjoy? Because I have.
This is pretty much the culmination of years of planning and excitement and can we play a small part of the Avengers theme, like a fair use 10-second chunk or something.
Actual theme?
Seconds.
Oh gosh, that's the stuff that the YouTube things hate the most.
I know, right? But
Well,
maybe if we talk through it.
So admittedly, what I was going to do was play at least some of the trailer that's out there for people, behind the scenes for us, for what's, as we're talking, or kind of throw it on the screen for everybody as we start talking about it, because there's so much to be potentially enjoyed about the movie. And so, let me go ahead and throw that on there as we're at least discussing this. I'm going to throw on a bit of the trailer going forward. Again, spoilers warning will stay on the screen. But, I'm not going to play the audio because that's the first thing that YouTube, the automatic bots fight against. Well, and there's so many good things to do. So the trailer kind of shows just in general everything from the first Avenger, Iron Man, through the current state, but it shows a bunch of just little scenes from the various Iron Mans going through, and then goes into where it is at the beginning of Endgame and where it starts with some different throwbacks to different characters. So even Captain America when he's first starting, it's kind of like the fact that all of those first Avengers, the ones that all came together to create it. They show a scene from Hawkeye and his family real quick, to a later scene of Hawkeye that's going through it, to I was gonna say Black Widow's in there, and they show just all these scenes we've kind of seen, all the way to Asgard and Thor, Odin. These are all things because the thing that, if you haven't noted, over the past 20 years, or essentially, what is it? As Babs is saying, almost 20 years, just under. But there's been 22 Marvel movies. This being the 22nd. Avengers Endgame.
Is this the first, like, I don't know how to say, like a series of films? That's what it's like. Is this the first of its kind?
Okay,
really?
so what we could say in the past is we've had movies that have had, trilogies, things like that, or where even like when you talk about things like Star Wars, where you've had trilogy, and offshoots. And so there are other movies that have, I would say, a continuous adventure into the same world.
Mm-hmm.
But I would argue that this is the first movie series to be such a continuously well thought out and, all tied together with singular storyline of movies ever made that I have seen.
Sure, yeah.
Where it's not just that they exist in the same world, they are one after the other, all leading into the culmination of this story of Avengers Endgame. And some of it we saw to a degree with, just the last Avenger movie with Infinity War, because that was where you were first kind of bringing it all together in a way that people are like, oh snap, what just happened? This ain't cool, and things like that. And so,
literally, right?
Well, it's one of those things that this has been really that first bring everything we've been working up to together in one place, and let's see what happens. What's interesting about the movie is, and we talked about little bits in kind of our general feel about it. Oh, and by the way, this is the opportunity now. If people wanted to call in, message us on Skype. And so message VtWShows on Skype and let me know, and I'll bring you into the call so we can have a big discussion about this. Otherwise, feel free to message us in the chat, and we'll talk to that as well. But all the way from like the beginning of this movie, right? And this is an epic movie. It's over 3 hours long. It does so much to bring together all of those other 21 movies that Disney Marvel have put out. And
in a way that's just, again, it's that idea of a completely unique TV. It's like a TV series. It's mad how it all comes together.
There's quite a bit, and it's, in my opinion, very impressive to kind of see how they were able to legitimately tie all the movies together with purpose. Where one of my big complaints that I've had with other, basically the obvious one in the room is anything DC has done trying to bring out their movies, is how theirs have always felt like a bit of an afterthought, in that the fact that they exist in anywhere close to the same world or same storyline, where the Marvel movies absolutely are like, we are here and we are all one place. And so they do a really good job, I think, of spending time in Avengers Endgame, reaching back and touching all of the movies, right, as best they can for where they are in the storyline today.
So before we really delve into this, let's give a quick overview of the stats, because I think that's a good overview of where we're standing with where this film,
like, as it begins.
We're really big. Like, let's look at the holistic view of what this film is, right? So this is from the Walt Disney Company itself. They did an article saying Marvel Studios' Avengers Endgame has shattered records with an unprecedented estimated global debut of $1.209 billion, becoming the first film in history to surpass the $1 billion mark in the opening weekend. $1 billion! That's madness! The film reached the $1 billion threshold in 5 days, more than twice as fast as its predecessor, Infinity War, which held the record at 11 days. The film set domestic, I'm guessing US, and international records, earning an estimated $350 million domestically and $859 million internationally.
Okay.
So it's smashed records.
It
right?
does show how how exciting this IP has been and how much people wanted to come see the Avengers movie, right? No question, it is a big deal for everyone who's been a fan. I will say, and this is my kind of discussion about what do these numbers mean in today's market, because there are more theaters showing this movie than have ever been shown in the past, and ticket prices around the world are higher than they've ever been. So while it's reached $1 billion and that's like this great threshold, when comparing it to previous movies and how big they were, you have to take that into context. That it is maybe not as holy cow ridiculous as some might make it want to feel, because in the past we didn't include the Chinese market, right, where the majority of humanity exists. And prior to this, ticket prices were significantly less than they used to be.
Yeah, but isn't this also massive in China?
Well, no, but that's what I'm saying. This blew up, and the overall billion includes the Chinese market, where older movies like Titanic and stuff like that had massive,
sure,
were not including things like China in that initial launch because they didn't have the same theaters and things like that. So there are just more theaters and more doing it. It's still a massive movie. I'm not trying to diminish that, but I do want to put it in context compared to previous smashes that have been out there. So it did do that.
That's fair. That's fair.
Also, to set the stage going into this one for people who didn't keep track, because one of the biggest things that came out of the previous movie, out of Infinity War, was everybody done died. Right? Everybody, that was like the big shocker from Infinity War, is how many people just ceased to exist in various forms.
Let me just give a quick overview of that, right? Because that was kind of the crazy thing, was how many people died. Because it was actually a lot of main characters as well. It wasn't as if it was just a bunch of like, oh no, half of humans are gone. Like, which would be, a plot point, but it wouldn't be interesting. Whereas this is actually, no, people you care about have died. So let's see. I think I can find a list here. Okay, the list
I have
included
one if not, yeah.
Loki.
Okay, so
Heimdall,
the key is this list are the ones who died in the movie, right? Who died from activities in actual Infinity War the movie, and this is a key point as we go forward to how deaths happened. So yes, it's part of the plot line for how things died and what does and doesn't get affected by what happens in the movie. So like you said,
yes, Infinity War, but not Endgame is what we're saying, right?
But so Infinity War, the people who died from causes other than, right, the culminating factor of Infinity War, like you said, were Loki, Heimdall, and who else?
Yes, it's Loki, Heimdall, Gamora, and Vision all die in Infinity War before the click, right?
Basically all by the hand of Thanos.
Yes. And then after that, the ones who actually died at the end, at plot point, so just for clearing it, I know we all know it, but let's just make sure we set the scene. So at the end of Infinity War, Thanos is standing there. He collects all the Infinity Stones. He puts them in his fancy multicolored glove, his fabulous glove. And he then says that he's going to equalize the universe. Is the whole plot point, right? This is what he wants to do. He decides that we are using resources too much, as not just as a race or a species, but all of existence, all of sentient beings are using the resources far too quickly. And so to ensure our survival for the long term, we need to cull 50% of all living beings, right? And no, it doesn't go to the scientific plot point of all the bacteria dying and stuff. It just talks about, like,
even all the plant life or all this and that. So yeah, it's kind of a...
Sure, that's totally skipped upon.
But it's also proven in Endgame as to how the logic of the Infinity Gems works, of what you wish for, what it is essentially do with the snap, which we'll get to in the end of what Endgame did. And so basically getting rid of, like you said, sentient life is kind of what Thanos chose.
So we lost at the end of the last film, sort of setting up for the new film. We lost Black Panther. We lost Spider-Man, Peter Parker. We lost Doctor Strange. We lost the Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes, and Falcon, Sam Wilson. Scarlet Witch, who, by the way, is one of the most powerful beings in the entire universe, and I'd love to talk more about that. The Guardians of the Galaxy mostly were gone, including Star-Lord, Groot, Drax, and Mantis. Only Rocket remains. Nick Fury dies. Maria Hill also dies. Hope Pym, Hank Pym, and Janet Van Dyne, which is the Wasp, and all those people all die. Shuri, which is Black Panther's sister. However, these people also survived, right? We had Captain America, we had Iron Man, we had Thor, we had Black Widow, Hulk, War Machine, Rocket, and Nebula, both from the Guardians of the Galaxy series. I don't know how to pronounce these because I haven't actually seen Black Panther. Okoye and M'Baku, Ant-Man, Hawkeye, and Captain Marvel all survive, right? And there's loads more that are in there on both sides. Obviously, there's
but those are kind of like the main characters throughout.
Right.
Yeah. So if you haven't got your spoilers right there you go. or at least
those
in
are
the initial
those are the first spoilers.
catch-up
So
ones, right?
we enter into Endgame with all these people already dead. So we're kind of like setting the scene of, we've already lost a whole bunch of people, including several Avengers, are now dead, and that sets probably a very unique precedent for Endgame. So we go in, and I think everybody knows that Endgame at some point is again, this is where the spoilers really begin, right? Just so you know, spoilers are now beginning for Endgame. So the real, I think everybody goes into Endgame, but even before you've seen it, you kind of know that the character's going to come back, right? You kind of have an idea because you don't expect, to be, to go into this last film and not have some kind of rejoicing of all the characters. That's kind of a requirement. It's not as if it's just going to be the Hulk takes on Thanos or something, and that's the end of the whole thing. I don't know about you, but I assumed they were going to be coming back at some point. Wayne.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was reacting to getting out the nonsense that showed up in our chat. And so, yeah.
I didn't notice.
So.
Oh, yeah. Okay, interesting. I've never seen that before. So I was saying that it's...
clean that
I
up
think we all
real
kind of
quick.
expected going into this new film that we were expecting to see all the characters come back at some point, right? Did you hope for that, or did you have that feeling when you went into see Endgame?
So what's interesting is that because of my previous... because of my knowledge of the Infinity War series as a whole, because of the comic books, I had a lot of ideas of what could happen, right?
Sure.
There was a general thought that the Infinity Stones have the power to reverse what had happened, just as equally as what had, so simply occurred. Now, there's a big difference between the comics and the movie, in the sense that the comics allowed people to use the Infinity Gems kind of without consequence, because they were truly embodiments of those aspects of the universe. Essentially, they were created with the universe as those aspects.
That makes sense.
And so anybody could essentially grab the power gem and have mass power. And the reality gem and change reality. Where in the movie series, they basically nerfed it, and they allowed it to be... Which makes sense to a balance of what they've shown in the movie so far, that thus using all of the gems at once and snapping it caused massive trauma, right? So already there was
I think it's like, depending on how much power you use, it'll hurt you too.
Yeah,
right?
Depending on how much of it you're doing. And in that grand scheme of, I'm erasing half the universe, essentially, of sentient things, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Right? That's a big thing. And so that's kind of a deal. So, the amount of damage it did. So already I knew there was going to be differences. But I figured going into the movie that at some point there had to be a scene where, the good guys win in a degree and are able to acquire the gems again in some form. However, what's neat about the way they presented Endgame, right, is right as it starts out, they do it very slow. And when I went and saw it, it was at a theater where they basically took out all of the other movies for the time frame they were starting for the first weekend to show Endgame like almost 24 hours kind of thing.
Oh,
Just
wow.
like it made it so that there were a ton of available showings, so I was able to see it Friday morning, first thing that weekend. But in doing so, there was no lead up. There were no previews, anything like that. It just went into the movie. And when it did, it was a little jarring because the first scene starts out with Hawkeye and his family, right? And that altogether, right, it starts as a slow scene. And first I was like, wait a second, is this a different movie that, Renner's in? And it took me a second, like, no, this is it. Oh, shit, we're in the movie, right? Because it wasn't, boom, Avengers or anything like that. It was just a scene that started with his family. And so it was just like,
cool.
It was just like, oh, snap. And so it was funny because the crowd was doing kind of the normal banter before the movie started. And then that came on, and everyone looked at it like, oh, it's a preview. Okay. And they're like, wait a second. And so the audience kind of slowly calmed down and got quiet. Like, oh, wait, we're in this. Oh, it's time. Let's go. So it was an interesting kind of transition.
That's unusual, isn't it?
But I think it was because they were forcing it onto all the different theaters, so they didn't have the normal roll heading up to it like they would in the bigger different theaters and throughout where I saw it. But it was interesting too because in my opinion, Endgame started off somewhat slow. Right? It started with a reintroduction to the audience of kind of the place the world is today. But in a way, they started it right at a scene where Hawkeye, who essentially was absent from the previous movies, because
Which everybody commented on, by the way. I don't know if you had the same experience, but I found everybody was talking about the fact that Hawkeye was like barely there, and that's why he's crap.
What was interesting about that is because, admittedly, he had been put on house arrest because of the whole initiative across of kind of controlling superheroes that was going on in the whole like storyline from Civil War. And so his interaction with that, and they show, and there's some great sites out there that talk about some of the Easter eggs throughout the movie. Because I will give credit to Disney Marvel. There were better geeks than I and most of the other nerds I know who made this movie. They were true to so much comic lore.
Well, they did. It was just mad.
It's impressive when you realize all the details they actually spent in this movie. But him showing the ankle bracelet, the same as that Ant-Man had prior, essentially, to when he gets kind of exonerated of his issues and then gets done. So there are so many little tidbits even in that. But him with his family, and he starts out, and it's great too, because another one of the Easter eggs there is it's the first time you ever hear the name Hawkeye mentioned in any of MCU in the movies, is when he mentions it to his daughter, and as she shoots and does a great job. It is the first time.
I noticed that.
Only other time that anything comes up that even references him is in one of the earlier movies. I forget which one, but someone's asking, like, have you seen, and they say his normal character name, and the person responds, oh, you mean Hawk? And that's the closest they ever come to using his code name any other time in the MCU. And so it's him saying, oh, yeah, you're basically Hawkeye right there, to his daughter is the only time his name's actually stated as Hawkeye.
I had no idea. That's cool.
Again, there's so many little geek things that happen throughout this movie. But then you get into the scene, right?
Really neat.
And right away, you're sit there with him doing all these things is like he's living his happy life, and then for him, the snap happens. And the next thing you know,
they
you
did
look,
that so well.
and it's half of humanity, but for him, it's his entire family. His wife, his daughter, his son, just gone.
Yeah, it's 50% of humanity, which it depends on where you are. It depends on how, like, there's no, I don't know how to say this. There's no like recurring rule of like 50%, 50% of like subgroups or anything. It's 50% of humanity, which could mean anything, right? It could mean by random chance that means like an entire country is almost wiped out, whereas another one might be absolutely fine, more or less. And that's kind of what it's saying, because another one of the people that is mentioned as gets wiped out in Infinity War, which really annoyed me, was Spider-Man's school. It seems that the entire school was wiped out. And that annoyed the piss out of me.
The entire school? I'm trying to remember, because I don't remember how that scene plays out.
I can say it, but I'm wary of not going too far ahead. But we find out that, yeah, pretty much the entire, as far as we can see a camera pan from when everything, like, so, okay, here's the big spoiler, a lot of people come back to life. Thanos' click gets undone at some point. We see Spider-Man like get reunited with his friends, but it's like, wait a minute, that means Spider-Man, his sidekick, his girl interest, Mary Jane, and all the other like side characters that you see running around. So they're all just there suddenly. It's like, wait a minute, that's so convenient that the entire school.
Okay, well, I will go into a whole different discussion about convenience in the movie, but.
Well, before so Marvel actually made a statement. Let me see if I can find it. So a spokesperson for Marvel actually came out and said that most of the school, just by happenstance, happens to all perish, which is very convenient for the end scene where they all reunite. Okay. Where in reality, most of them aren't still 15, or if you thought half of them died, you'd expect half of them to now be at uni. Moved on at college, working full time.
You say that, but there's also the other aspect that they show in the movie, right? Which is how everything you initially get the shock and reminder of what happened at the snap with Hawkeye's family, but then you go into with basically Captain America and his help group, the idea that, oh, by the way, time has passed, right? But they actually go back into it. At least I'm trying to remember the order of that, because the 5 years piece. It's actually not right then, right? They come back and Captain Marvel comes in, and essentially the group's been dealing with little bits, but they go and they say, okay, let's go get the stones back, right? We're still ant. We need to fix things. Let's go find Thanos. How do we find him? And they get in a happenstance where they detect an anomaly in space and time, right? That is the same energy that essentially the Infinity Gems project. And in doing so, you have Captain Marvel, Thor, it's funny because the whole scene, so many people have equated to like Eminem from 8 Mile. And they're like hoodie on, looking all morose in the corner there. But the team there, shocked at what happened and saying, oh crap, we lost. But having that drive to want to fix things and do more, that when Captain Marvel suddenly shows up, they're like, hey, we have a better chance now. This person's very powerful. Although great banter about like, where you been? And the whole like, there's a bigger universe and Thanos has been throughout. And this...
I thought they dealt with that really well, actually, because so for those who haven't seen the Captain Marvel film, she is female Goku, right? Like, she's just so powerful. Like, it's not even... She's Superman, right? She's the Superman of the...
She
of
is,
that
and that's actually quite true in the way that Captain Marvel was presented in the Marvel comics, although... For people who don't recall, Captain Marvel has been many faces of Captain Marvel throughout the history of the comics. Was initially a male character, and throughout time has adjusted multiple times to essentially today being the Captain Marvel we see. So there's a long history to Captain Marvel and a whole lot of back and forth between DC Comics and Marvel and all these things. But the character was essentially Marvel's version of Superman. And there was some concern, and we'll get into this more later, about how powerful Captain Marvel would actually be. Because they showed her out as just suddenly the super powerful character, and for those who are fans of the whole series, there was fear that the Captain Marvel character coming into Infinity War / Endgame would suddenly become the focus, and that would take away from other characters. There was some concern there because of the franchise and the build-up that all these characters have done over the past almost 20 years. To just have like the new kid on the block suddenly be the hotness, right, and the thing that happens. Mm-hmm. And so there's some concern there. But anyhow, what did happen is when Captain Marvel shows up and has the power and this and that, and is just kind of got this detached still from humanity kind of opinion of how things work. When they go and say, like, here's a challenge, Captain Marvel also has such an ego that she just right off the bat says, yep, let's just go kill Thanos, as Babs is saying in the chat. It's like, yep, why is this an issue? We now know where he is because this anomaly, let's just go kill him. Everyone's like, what? And they have the little scene where Thor comes in and is like...
He's got a reason for it, though, right? I mean, she's insanely powerful.
She is, but there's also that sense because she came out of nowhere and has not interacted with Thanos before. That, like I said, that's where she comes with this massive ego. That's like...
She's not interacted with Thanos before, but she's literally been, like, for the past 5 years... ever since the film, let's just say, her own film.
Yeah,
she's
gallivanting
the universe, dealing with stuff,
for essentially
right?
20 years. She's been flying around the universe, dealing with things, and in the aftermath of what Thanos just running around the universe has done. And so she has some backing there, but there is a piece where she comes down, and the rest of the heroes who've been fighting and dealing with it and have fought Thanos are suffering for the loss. That she walks in like, "Oh, y'all bitches, so oh well, I'm just going to take care of this." Which to me was a little bit of like a, who are you kind of thing. But it's fine. Yeah. It worked out. It was just, there was a piece there where I was like, wow, this girl.
I think about it, right? If you spend 20 years flying around the universe and you're like, okay, where's the problem? Okay, I'll go deal with it. And people are like, oh, you don't quite understand how powerful. Oh, like I imagine each planet will have their own, not necessarily Avengers, but like some kind of superpower that.
Well, that's actually
she's probably quite used to people underestimating her, right?
Well, perhaps, but that is actually one of the things in the Marvel Universe that makes Earth unique. Is that we're kind of the nexus. The Earth is the nexus of all kind of crazy things happening in the universe. So superpowers are actually somewhat in proportionally focused on Earth. But regardless, right? Okay, so that sets the scene where they say, all right, we can do it. Let's go get him. So they show up and they find where the garden is because of this impulse of the infinity energy being used again. They show up and, like, out of the blue, and it's funny because I've seen so many memes now finally hitting the social media where, Thanos is essentially just like, I'm retired. I'm chilling. I'm on my planet. What up? And they just bust up in his grill like, hey, we're not cool with this. Where's the gems? We're going to fix things. And in a great twist from the comics is that in the comics, the gems still existed and they basically wrenched them from his control to then do the things they do. In this in this movie, they go in there and he thought ahead. And the last energy they felt was him saying, and the gems cease to exist. Thus,
Which again, it was a very smart decision from him, by the way.
Yeah!
Playing on the fact that he's an incredibly intelligent character, right? He has been one of the most interesting villains I think I've seen in film in a long, long, long time.
Oh, and that's the thing. For me, Thanos has been one of my favorite villains since the original writing of the Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War series. I've loved him as a character from that. Previously, he was more one-dimensional, but in this, I really loved. Saw some interviews with the actual creator of him, and they loved it. The guy who wrote Thanos loved it.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. That's
cool. Yeah, no, he saw and he was like, they knocked it out of the park. I love what they did with my character.
That's awesome. Because I see Thanos as what was originally in the first couple of films. He was very, I don't know. Yeah, he was just the generic kind of quiet villain and sit on his throne and go like, oh, I'm grumpy about things. Kill people, I hate them. And that was pretty much it. But he evolves with his, like, as a character, he really evolved from this generic villain that you see in Guardians of the Galaxy and such to this intelligent, stoic, philosophical villain who you can sympathize with his cause. I mean, there's a reason that subreddit, Thanos Did Nothing Wrong, exploded and with popularity. Let me actually check. Nothing wrong. Let me see.
Even I did that where people.
This subreddit has.
It came even to a thing where as people would. I've seen it in things where there's social media talking about like traffic in big cities, and just being stuck behind traffic in all these cars, and like comments like, "I understand Thanos at this point." Right? There are just too many people here. Things like that. So I've seen a bunch of those. and speaking directly as you're looking that up to what Bab said there, because he's just a step ahead of us in the storyline. When they came in, he snapped away the gauntlet or the gems and everything. They hit you with a side line in the movie where you're not expecting, because you're like, okay, this is a plan. They're going to get the gems. They're going to wish people back. It's going to be great. And then he comes out and got rid of them. They're like, what the heck? What do we do now? And they're so concerned that what's great is it sets up the storyline for Thor, the whole subplot there with Thor, where he just goes in and straight up like cuts off Thanos' head right at the beginning.
It was so good.
It's two-sided, right? But they just cut off his head and everyone's like, oh, snap, you just killed the main villain in the first 15 minutes of the film.
Well, I love Captain America's response to it, because you saw that he was kind of like, whoa, Thor, like, what, you just killed a man who's unarmed, and then he thinks about it, and he's like, wait, he is, like, the most mega Hitler of all time.
Yeah, he did all of the bad.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, just... I think Thor did the only ethical thing you can do in that point.
But it was interesting, right? Because it was a combination of, like, it set the stage for Thor and everything that happens with him, because not only did he do the thing, because it was in a way, and a lot of stuff I've seen, he failed to do it when it was appropriate the first time. Like, he had an opportunity in Infinity War to potentially take Thanos' head then, and hesitated, didn't, and therefore they failed. This is almost like a callback to it, saying, if only he had done it the first time. And so he was feeling guilt. And they show it multiple times in the movie that Thor is suffering the weight of the universe on his shoulders. As the god of thunder, and how he should have been able to protect everyone. And due to his hesitation the initial time, he almost is trying to make up for it, but it's kind of like a, retroactive, it's too late now anyways. And so when he does take the head, and they say that, and I love that Babs is quoting it, right? I went for the head, right? When they're kind of questioning, like, dude, what did you do? He's like, I went for the head, obviously. But at the same time,
I still think it was the only ethical thing you could do in this.
Well, it was like. Well, the challenge was it was somewhat abrupt, because you had the feeling in that scene that the group was kind of like, because they were still shocked that the gems were gone, and so their plan was done. That it was almost like they wanted to engage Thanos to say, what else could we do, right? Question him. How did you get rid of them? Is there a way we could bring them back? And this and that, right? But before they had the opportunity to engage with Thanos more, to make him suffer or do anything like that, Thor just shut it down
further.
Yeah, just the thing.
He knows more of the stones than anybody, right?
Exactly, and so just to have any idea of it, Thor was so caught up in the God, I failed the first time, and you just did this thing, and I'm shocked, and just straight up beheaded him, right? But it lends itself so well to setting the stage for what happens next. Because basically, right at that point, we get the 5 years later. So at that moment, they then say, so that failed, and now life has continued for 5 years. Good luck. And they bring you now back to Earth with what everyone's doing 5 years later. And yeah, all of life is gone. It really happened, and people are now suffering through that. And so that's where you get into Captain America doing a group, basically, sessions where he's support group of people who have lost, and how are they dealing with it, right?
It's just so Captain America to do that.
But it also continues that theme of like really giving you some insight into humanity and what the world's dealing with, where you have people talking about, hey, I just dated for the first time again, and go figure, the first thing that comes up is all of the loss, and how are you dealing with people being gone, and what's going on, and how society and the world has failed in many ways, right? Because without all the same structure, places have gone to pot around and stuff, where things of nature have taken over because not everyone's there living in the places they were, not all the same infrastructure's there. And kind of accelerating through, because I know this is going to continue into the talk, you get the sense of like foreboding, or just that it's not happy. Right, they take you through like this whole like almost slow downward trend of like that's where we're at, deal with it, so that you can really feel the challenge in the world. And to me, that was brilliant, right? Because now they've taken it, because this is where they really diverged from the comics, and in a way they were owning their own storyline by presenting that things have continued through this level of where we took the world, to see how everyone's affected by it. And it was epic, because you even have like all the people we've mentioned were gone. They have a scene then back to Avengers headquarters, where you're now left with Black Widow as the lead, as the person trying to...
By the way, okay, here's another character development that I was in love with. So people always said Black Widow sucks, right? She's like...
What? Who said that shit? Who said that? I love Black Widow.
Combat-wise, she does suck. She
doesn't. She's the alpha human.
The one scene where
she's the
was
alpha
in that
human
Russian jail or whatever.
Yeah,
and she was the prisoner, right?
Yeah,
and
when she was interrogating them from her terms. Yeah.
Yeah, that one was awesome, right? But still, that's against other humans, right? In an actual battle, she's kind of useless. She's good at doing the stealth and stuff and strategy, and she does. Like, you'll notice in the previous films, I think it's Civil War and the likes, she does coordinate a lot of stuff, which is really useful.
She's a spy. She's a tactician. No, you see her fight. You see her deal with the Hulk when he's raging in Civil War on the air carrier. Yeah. You see her in Civil War when they're going back and forth. She fights against Hawkeye, right, directly. Because what it is that people, I feel like, give so much disservice to characters in the Marvel Universe is that, yes, there are different levels of power in the Marvel Universe.
I'm getting there, right?
Okay.
I just feel that in the previous films, it wasn't shown properly. Or she didn't have the chance to bloom, in my opinion.
What?
Right?
I thought she did great.
I think that in this film, the 5 years later thing, she replaced Nick Fury. And it all comes together. It's like, she was Nick Fury's apprentice. For God's sake, she was she's the next head of like S.H.I.E.L.D. pretty much. Like she's that impressive, and she is coordinating a worldwide group of superheroes and other efforts to the point where people are asking her like, "There's a natural disaster. What do we do?" And she's like, "Nothing. It's a natural disaster.
Yeah,
what are we supposed to do?"
Well, so I will give you credit. Yes, they do flesh out her character further than this, but I do argue back that I don't believe Black Widow was ever poorly represented. I think the challenge people run into, because I hear this argument from my cousin all the time, that he's like, oh, I don't care about any character who's not the Hulk. Because for him, it's all about the power level, right? And so for him, the Hulk is so...
incredibly powerful.
But here's where I say it, right? The Hulk is so powerful. Thor is so powerful that even there, my cousin's like, Captain America's a punk. Who cares? Because compared to the Thors and... those level of Asgardians and the universal powers, Captain America doesn't even rate. But what I put forth is that there are tiers to those powers, and each character does their part within their bracket. And so that's why you see Black Widow succeeding at infiltrating an area that she needs to when she needs to, using the skills she has against other humans. She doesn't even try to go against some of these superpowers because it's just dumb. That wouldn't make any sense. So
I'd give her more credit than that. Actually, I'd say that she does try to.
Well, she does try, but she tries.
Failed, right?
She tries to her level, where it's not like she's going to go and sucker punch Thanos in the face. But she may try, and I think she did. She tried to run around and like distract and grab hold of and do things with amongst everyone else. And so it's the whole point of being able to show that they all can be effective in their own power level.
Absolutely.
And that's something that anyone who's read the comics has understood about the MCU forever. Because the difference between the MCU and DC is that the DC characters are all gods. Every single DC character is essentially a god of that aspect. Where in the MCU, you have regular people that happen to be given a power, an ability, and then have to deal with how that affects their lives, right? And yes, I agree completely, Ziora, that the MCU, and this is, I have a section in my notes here about controversy, right, with Endgame, about the Hulk, that we will get into further about the nerfing of the Hulk. But
was fully nerfed, yeah.
But that's the thing where it comes to Black Widow, I think it shows, because in that scene, right, she's suffering from the losses she's had and everybody being gone, and she's just trying to find a place in the world, right? And so many people are, and it's not just the world, it's the universe, because she's now interacting with the remnants through Rocket and through Captain Marvel and through Falcon and others of, I think it's Falcon still, but the people who are still alive, essentially, to how they are dealing with the world. Like you say, natural disasters versus actual issues. And the whole time trying to find some semblance of like, how do we deal with maybe fixing things? But it's so dire at that point. Yeah. And then it's brought back again because what happens after that is essentially one of the fallouts of this whole scene. Earlier on, but taken forth, is that Tony Stark, and there's some great pieces there, right? In the Guardians of the Galaxy scene at the end of Infinity War, he's left in space with it's him, Gamora, and Rocket. That's it. The rest of the Guardians are gone and everything in space. Spider-Man's gone and everyone's just sad. And as they're coming back, the ship is basically, they're on a light ship that's not meant to really traverse the universe, and they have no supplies or nothing, and he's doing a scene back to Pepper Potts about, you know, basically his final moments, but using the Iron Man suit to record it, which harkens back to Iron Man 2, I believe.
Yeah. By the way, there was a lot, just in general, there was a lot of that throughout the whole.
Dude, there were throwbacks throughout the movie.
Many throwbacks.
And I will put
subtle ones, like just beautifully subtle ones.
More subtle than you know, and where I said, like, there were better nerds than me who made this film. In fact, I am going to put up, if I can, I'll link it in here for you to watch after the show here, about one of my favorite things that was one of my favorite things to watch. But it's Endgame Easter eggs, and I want to say it's from Screen Rant. Yeah, Screen Crush, so part of the Screen Rant network and such. I'm going to link this in the chat right here and put it out there for everyone to kind of watch in our notes and stuff as well, because they do such a good job of showing so many of these geek moments and really, like, obscure, like, throwback things. I'm just like, they did that? What? That to me have been super impressive. And so add an opportunity to watch this when you can. There it's in the notes, a link, something to check out. But yes, they did so many good throwbacks, so many good geek things that when it goes to, like, I want to somewhat, it's bad because, right, it's a 3-hour movie. I've seen it once and trying to keep everything in order from what happened. But
that's the thing. It was 3 hours because they had to make it longer, right? Because they had to fit everything in. But
it made sense.
Like every second worth it. It was not, you didn't go in there feeling like there was a wasted second.
Well, the way I put it is it started slow, but then started to really progress all the way through to the finale. So by the end of it, the pacing was so big that it was hard to catch your breath.
It was like a sine wave that was increasing over time, I found. Like they did a really good job of increasing the pace and then slowing it down.
Well, and that's one of the
controversies. I don't feel like it was a rapid increase, but it was like a clear.
Well, it continued to grow throughout the process. And I heard some people's feedback where they were a little concerned by that because they said that it was almost too much for them. In that, well, in the sense that then it was getting bigger highs and lows, that those lows would be like, you gave me a funny moment, then you gave me a sad moment, then you gave me an action moment, then you gave me... I can't deal with it. It's too much. And so for me, it was like, this is such a good ride. They really did elicit and pull from the audience those kind of reactions, right? Where you had moments just like, this is so much of an experience. Holy cow.
Did you cry, by the way, at any point?
Oh, yeah. No, I absolutely cried. It was moments where it was just like tears welling to moments where it was like, yeah, no, that's some stuff. From like the introduction and remembering of what people are dealing with to moments that were just dear that happened that were like, oh, they did that, right? Because what's funny, and this is one of those kind of, because there are, I got to put in my notes, like one of the biggest controversies in my mind was convenience, but regardless, that they had like things that happened throughout, but it's turned into like certain pivotal moments and characters. But I thought, to me, they gave every character in the movie a good amount of screen time and things that they harkened back where if you remembered everyone involved, they all got their time to shine. And so even to the point where one of the most pivotal moments and characters in this whole series is Ant-Man. Because while the world is crap and people are suffering, Ant-Man, who's been stuck in, if you remember the end of Ant-Man 2, Ant-Man and Wasp, he's in the quantum realm because they're like, hey, you can do this now? You retrieved, the gal's mom and Pym's wife and such from the quantum realm? Awesome. And he goes back to do it, and then they go to dust. And he's stuck there like,
yeah, the people
hey,
that are
guys.
supposed to bring him back from the quantum realm. By the way, this must be so confusing for people who haven't seen these films.
Hey, this is why we said...
This guy called Ant-Man went to the quantum realm, but he couldn't come back because of dust. Like, what?
Well, so what it was is, right, the mechanism they were using to bring him 2 and 4 was manned by people external to the suit and him in the world. They had to channel and bring him out of it. And so with that, the only thing that made the story progress is the fact that a random rat walked across the controls in the van, that after it got dust, the van had been impounded and was stuck in a storage unit, and a rat came by, hit the right button sequence, and it thus created the time or the quantum travel loop back to bring Ant-Man back.
So I had an argument with somebody about that part, actually, about the rat. Because somebody was saying to me, like, oh, it's so dumb that that pretty much just wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for that rat. And I was like, why do you think in the previous film, Doctor Strange looked at like 50 million different realities?
14 million different possibilities, and
clearly
the only one where they win.
One of the few where a rat happened to walk over something to make it happen, right? Like, it actually lines up. It actually lines up quite nicely.
And that's part of the discussion, and there's another one that the Screen Rant guys, that they talk specifically about plot challenges in the movie that they have answers for, some of which would be off screen, but ways to explain all the potential plot holes that are there, because every time you touch time, plots become an issue. And yes, Babs, you're saying, do we decide that the rat is the hero of the movie? Well, the rat is the only reason that it's able to actually work, right? Because he brings Ant-Man back. When Ant-Man comes back, he goes to Avenger headquarters, which is derelict for the most part, that Black Widow's at, and a handful of people that are still doing anything. He's like, hey, remember me? And it's a great scene also because Ant-Man, in his time frame in the quantum realm, has only experienced about 4 or 5 days of time, where there's been 5 years of time in the real world. And so he comes back and the world's changed. I love how they play out that sequence to him going home even, and the streets are like overgrown, and there's some kid that runs out and he's like, what's going on? And the kid's just like, whatever, dude, I'm not ignoring you. And he finds his daughter, which is like so... one of those cry moments, right? One of those sweet moments, because everything that Ant-Man did was for his daughter and for the fact that he had been fighting for custody and things like that. To then have her still be alive was just, to me, a moment. And him have that like, oh snap, but she's older. And it's, 5 years later. And him just going like, ah, right? And just kind of that sequence of what it is. And, no, it's funny, right? Because it is a question of like, who are the heroes in this movie? There's so many opportunities. Gosh, and so
how overpowered is Doctor Strange, though, right?
Well, so like, I've seen a lot of arguments that he is the strongest Marvel character currently.
Yeah, he will win because he made it. He chose a path that was so unlikely, and not only did he die, but he managed to make himself come back due to.
Well, he was aware of the proper sequences and it goes into like his prediction and therefore having to play it out so that it would work the one path that he saw as potential success in the long run, that every other solution failed. So there's that argument, right? But because of his prediction, that's where the rat hitting it, that's where other things happen, that it's all based on what he saw. So there's a lot of discussion to say who's the hero of the movie and how does it work. But there's so many scenes. Okay, because time is going to fly here, and we haven't even gotten to the bad things. All right, so movie progresses. We get so much glory in that, okay, we get the whole scenes of why. They go back. It turns into this whole time heist series of things that they both define and talk about how the Marvel Universe works. And one of the big things that saves the plot hole issue is and we get this wonderful montage of hints back to the original movies, right? Where now characters that are still alive go back in time to grab the Infinity Stones from where they existed in different parts of time to come forward. And they're able to address one of the potential plot holes in there by going to New York, seeing what the Guardian was doing from Doctor Strange during that time frame, that she was actually active and doing things, even though you don't see them until the Doctor Strange movie, that she was fighting off forces, but from the Sanctum there in New York.
Yep.
And that she has a discussion with the Hulk, Bruce Banner at the time, Professor Hulk, officially kind of that rendition they have. About,
I really liked as a character, by the way.
well, it's interesting, but it's also another controversial point, right? But
Yes.
that what happens, and they explain in that scene to the way timelines work in the Marvel Universe, that every time you change something, a new branch of the timeline occurs. And that it's very difficult to come back to your original timeline unless you set everything back in line to remerge that timeline to it. Otherwise, you have an infinitely branching existence of timelines, which is important because that explains some of the issues with later in the finale scenes of Endgame. With some of the big things that happen. So that happens. They go through this whole time heist thing that gives us some beautiful moments where the characters get to revisit basically a bunch of the old movies that we saw, but from a different perspective. Plus and minus for how certain characters are done. Probably one of the favorite scenes I had there was they failed in retrieving some of the stones when they went back to aftermath of the initial Avengers movie, when when the Tesseract and the Soul and the Mind Stone were both in the same. I want to say those two were in the same place, and in their goal to get them, they lose them in part. But there's some great moments there that harken back even again to previous scenes. Now the characters know what's going to happen because they lived through it. Moment with Captain America in the elevator, going down with all the agents from Shield. That was so good because you had the agents of Shield, and it was the exact scene from Civil War, where you first find out that Hydra has essentially proliferated all of S.H.I.E.L.D. And so it's like the same exact character, same exact scene with Captain America in the middle, and he's like, hey, I need to take this case that has a Tesseract in it because I need to do it. And they're like, no, we're going to take theirs. And you see people flexing and getting ready for that same fight scene. Yeah, and then how Captain America, spoiler, comes right at that moment, turns and is like, no, I've been instructed to do this. Reaches over to the guy and goes, Hail Hydra. What? Which is so good, right? Because he's like...
It was so good to watch, but okay, how does that work out in terms of branching timelines? Because that's a change, right? That's a clear
It is
change.
a change, and so it would change the timeline going forward, other than perhaps that scene when it happens in the future, they're still instructed to take out Captain America. And so it may still tie into that, but that is a whole chain, right? And it does, as Bab's bringing up, right? There's a comic line where that came out, and there's a lot of controversy in the comics where they said that Captain America was an actual Hydra agent the whole time, which most people were like, F you, heck no, that goes against everything I've ever known about Captain America, I don't accept it. And a lot of people felt that way. So it was great that it was almost like a tie to that, but at the same time, you saw him use that information and totally change the scene. And then walk out. And then you have other pieces which will lead into Disney Plus and where they're going with that, where it all falls apart. The Tesseract ends up bambling on falling out of the stuff on the floor, and Loki gets there and says, mine, grabs it, disappears.
Yeah, whatever happened with that, by the way? I don't remember that.
That's why I said Disney Plus. No, it's another thread. It's another thread because there's supposed to be a Disney Plus series coming out for Loki on Disney's new streaming service. That is a Loki series, which I believe will come directly from the fact that Loki got hold of the Tesseract at that point, zipped out, and who knows where that timeline goes. Because essentially there are branching timelines that happen from even what we see. So the original people and things that happen don't exist as we go forward in Endgame as part of the whole timeline thing. But then they do the beautiful scene where they go further back when they were last all collected in one place, which gets to see original origin of S.H.I.E.L.D. We get to see Tony Stark's father again, and they have a beautiful moment, and just so good there. You get the moment where Captain America gets to see Peggy Carter again, and it's kind of like, oh my gosh, my gal. which sets up things later. It's just so many throwbacks, right? So many ties and things they did in this movie. And some of the stuff that you won't know unless you, like I said, go watch that link, is the details they did even with like music cues and stuff at different moments. They chose specific songs that weren't just because it's a cool song, but because the message of that song from this group meant this thing which ties to that scene. And it's just, God, it's so good the things they did with it. And it's weird, right? Because I didn't have this much emphasis and like joy into it at the time of. There were moments I cheered and absolutely loved it while watching it, but until I started researching more about the spoilers and other things and things they did, that I was like, I appreciate this movie so much more because I now understand the detail of what they did. Like, absolutely. Holy cow. Like, I'm actually welling up now more with my joy in what they did with the movie than I am with any, like, tearful moments, which they had those too. Okay,
so
go,
just
please.
as an overview, right? So my overview of the whole thing, so not just this film, but all the films, I guess. And I don't feel like people are talking about this very much, and I find it kind of mad. And I alluded to it at the very start when we first started talking about it. I think that this series of films is one of the most unique out there, not just because it's like this omnibus of like, it's like a TV series in film format, which is mad in itself. It's not just some trilogy or something. It's like it's this branching story of different interesting characters that all came together so well. But it's the complexity and the scale of this is unlike any other film I've heard of. It is so in depth. Every single character, every single bit of music, it's just been so thoroughly well thought out that it's if you drew like a branching timeline of all the different characters and where they are and what they're doing and how time changes, and you know, it's maddening to think. I think, and my point is that I feel like as a society of all the people who have been watching these films over the years, we experienced something special together. Humanity produced something that is this is a jewel in film, in literature, in terms of the scripts that are put behind it, and in art, and in terms of how films will be made in the future. I think this is a landmark moment in the film industry. That could you imagine explaining this to somebody who watches like a superhero film in like the 80s or the 90s? They'd be like, oh yeah, there was one standalone, maybe like an old Hulk film, right? Or even in the 2000s, it'd be like, oh yeah, so there's a couple of good Spider-Man films, right? Yeah, they were good. But comparing like one of those Spider-Man films, which is, you know, thoroughly 2D compared to anything as an Avengers series, because it's like a single storyline with an obvious romance is required and yada yada yada. It feels like everything in the Avengers was just such pure quality, right? Like, every scene is so polished. It's not just thrown in there because some producer said, yeah, add in some romance. Maybe the Thor films, you can argue that with. But but even then, they tied that back so nicely in the Avengers series. Like, it's one of the reasons that Thor has this big downfall is because he keeps crying about Jane, right? He keeps crying.
We haven't even got into it.
After 5 years.
Well, because he has moments, and that's like, I am not able to keep a coherent direction in this because there's too much to cover. You know, trying to cover a 3-hour movie in an hour time frame of talking, essentially. But Thor, dude, Dad Body Thor. Right?
Oh, I love Dad Body
That was
Thor.
like one of the best things they did in the movie. The fact that after the 5 years, he suffered so much for the responsibility that he just ate and sat at home and watched his friends play Fortnite. And literally that's all he did, right? That's what they did.
Funny.
Every gamer out there, and some of the best characters, right? Because I forget the character's name, right? I forget the name of the guy with the squeaky voice.
Characters, yeah.
But that they're together playing Fortnite, and you know, having somebody troll them online, and they're like, "Hey Thor, can you help us out?
Or literally,
this guy's giving me crap." And Thor gets out there,
strike them with a thunderbolt. So
I will come through here and get you. Oh my gosh! It was so good. And it's great, right? Because so many people prior to this movie were like, hey, Thor is my boy, because Chris Hemsworth, in his every moment they've had with him, has shown a scene at some point with him without a shirt, and all the gals take the moment to go like, la 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 la, right? And admittedly, that's a good-looking man. He's done some work.
Oh, well,
I give him all the credit in the world. That he came out as the ultimate, dad bod, freaking Lebowski version of a character of Thor was brilliant. And
I couldn't believe it.
I
could not believe they actually did that.
It was so good.
Quite a hard decision to get through the board, right? Like,
oh God, no!
Right, you know that how we get a lot of sales because girls love Thor.
You know that character that all the girls love?
We're gonna make him fat.
We're gonna make him like the pizza eating, sitting on his butt, never washing version. That'll sell, right? Women will love that. Oh, and yes, Babs, exactly that. That they were so good about it that they never made him thin, and that was something that even Kevin Smith said because I loved watching this kind of enthusiasm Kevin Smith had talking about his love of the movie. That even when he finally has the moment to hero up again and get his axe and do the lightning and all that, he still doesn't become thin. That at that point, as they jokingly say, his armor's there and all that happens is his beard gets braided. But otherwise, he still has dad bod.
For him to thin up.
Right? So that was what everybody thought. Everybody thought that.
It made sense, right?
Oh, it's so good.
A god of thunder and, being the protector of your civilization for, centuries. It makes perfect sense that you'll, still be able to...
It just makes sense. Like, boom, I'm worthy, and it happens. Oh, and that they gave throwback to the Thor movies, and that he actually got to converse with his mom, who didn't have more than, like, a line in the previous movie, and how that all worked. And just... That was really sweet. They were genuine with Thor's level of concern and brokenness from having failed to save humanity, save the universe, and how that affected him, that he was living life, but he was no longer a god. He was no longer a leader. He was just existing because he was so broken by failing.
Let me go into a little bit of details to why he was so broken, right?
This show may go long, by the way, everybody.
That really sold it to me. So basically, people were saying, it's a bit mad that he was broken so much from it. But the thing is, if you think about across the Thor trilogy and the other Avengers films, this is what happened to Thor. He, went to Earth, met Jane, yada, 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 Thor 1, right? He joins the Avengers, yada, yada, yada. Okay. He then has his father die, first of all. His mother dies.
Dude, everyone.
His brother dies and is imprisoned and dies again.
Oh, man, and the scene they put him back in is when the day his mom's gonna die.
Right? Yeah, it's crazy. So his mom's dead, his dad's dead, his brother is dead twice over, at least twice. Then he's in charge of a civilization, which then falls. Right, his entire Asgard
is gone.
It's gone,
decimated.
Right?
Yeah.
He then is left in space with all the fellow Asgardians. Then Thanos comes and screws them up, so he loses like a whole bunch more Asgardians that are left behind after the civilization falls. They go to Earth. They make the new civilization there. Fine. Then Thanos snaps his fingers. Half of them are gone again. Like he has.
How much of a mind f is that? Yeah, no.
Like his dad, when his dad was alive, there was the entire civilization, and then for Thor was in charge for 5 years, and there's a dozen left.
You can feel the weight of the existence of life on Thor's shoulders, and so it makes sense that he suffered the way he has. And so his character plays out so genuine throughout the rest of the movie. It's wonderful. And yes, as Babs says, and it's one of the memes I've been seeing online that I've loved, is people have said, my favorite meme, honestly, has been, I've been working out all this long to hopefully get the body of Thor, and now I've succeeded.
Yes, I've been saying that.
Yeah, right? It's not that I have become what Chris Hemsworth in his glory days has. I have allowed the series to adjust the meme or the vision of what Thor is to now meet me.
Yes.
Oh, gosh. And so, yes, it's so good.
Too good. Good.
No, it's wonderful. And so, Thor is just a wonderful character throughout. They have a great...
Talk about the Fortnite reference a little bit?
The which one?
Because the Fortnite reference itself, that's pretty interesting.
Well, it was quick, it was there, it was what was hot, it was interesting.
So timely.
The adult gamer in me is sad by it because, yes, it's timely and because children are the only ones who play Fortnite. But at the same time, yes, it is relevant at the time it was made. And I'm done with it because F Fortnite and it's terrible.
It was also... it's interesting because, last year and this year, they had an Avengers theme in Fortnite. So clearly they had a deal in place, right? which was cool. You could play as Thanos, and you know, there's Infinity Gauntlet and all this stuff. But the same thing happened again this year, the release of Endgame, and I thought, all right, that's just continuing on from last year. I did not expect that deal to also include Fortnite actually in the film, and that was just not only was it hilarious, but the business aspect's really really interesting because that's going to appeal to all the Fortnite players, which there's a lot of, and vice versa. All the Avengers players are going to be like, oh, what's that game Thor plays? Right? It's quite an interesting deal. That I thought they pulled it off very nicely because it's a very tough. That I think this has been a film of challenges, right? They had a lot of controversy in terms of the fact that this is another one, right? They actually had to deal with a big game that some people kind of looked down on, but they played it off so impressively. Everybody was dying of laughter in the theater for me. Like everybody around me was just like tears rolled down their face. They thought it was so funny to see like Thrall getting like pawning noobs and stuff and referring to it. So I think they pulled off something that was a very difficult challenge.
It was a quick scene, and they did do a good job of it. I appreciate what it was. I just hated that it was Fortnite. But at the same time, it makes sense why. But that's just because I would much... Anyhow, that's my bias as a PC gamer. My bias. Oh, gosh. There's so much of that. So Thor throughout was wonderful. All right. So, in essence, for people who hadn't seen it right, they get through the whole thing, and they do the time travel thing, and eventually they manage to get essentially all the Infinity Gems together so that they could essentially do a reverse snap, get them into their current time frame, fix everything, and then the idea is to then, because of talking to the Guardian and the branching timelines, the Hulk agrees that they could then take it and set the gems back where they were at the exact timeline that they stole them, so that timeline would continue as it would have, and thus lead to this current ending where they win. That's the idea. With that, before we get to the culminating series, because I'm just going to get amped again about the end sequence, is the controversies, right? Some of the things that were a little questionable about the movie that people had. Number one, Hulk was a wuss.
Yeah.
So one of the things, and this came up earlier in our discussion, I think it was Babs or someone else that said it, that throughout the last several films, they've basically been nerfing the Hulk. And it happened huge in Infinity Gauntlet, or Infinity War, right? Because once he got beat down by Thanos, he just never came back out. It was just Bruce Banner, and he had to get in the Hulkbuster armor and all that to even participate. But you never got to see the Hulk again. And I know a lot of people, that was sad. Excuse me, because the Hulk is such a loved character throughout all of comic history. He's straightforward, brutal, and powerful. And for a lot of people, it just resonates. And so to have to deal with Professor Hulk, which was cool, and to me it was that closer to Grey Hulk. I never read Professor Hulk, but an actual blend of intelligent and strong. But what hurt me was when they went back to New York during the big scene in the original Avengers, and he was like, all right, go, you can go smash stuff. And he was like, I moved the bench. I touched the car.
Funny. I thought that was pretty funny.
It was humorous, but it was also like, but you could still be the Hulk, just smart. You know, he could still throw things and be strong and be smart, be calculated, be strategic. Well, it doesn't have to just be rage.
Because Bruce Banner is something of, no, I wouldn't say pacifist, but he is very reluctant to ever induce violence.
In a scene like that, where you know what's happening and the world is ending and how important that is, even rational pacifist Bruce Banner Hulk would have been like, it's okay if I smash some crap, right? It's okay if I pummel some heads. But unfortunately, what we get from Endgame is none of that. The only time we get even close to real Hulk is when Thanos rains down, pain upon the Avenger headquarters, and conveniently nobody dies, and just throws bombardment from space or from his ship above, and Hulk holds up the structure to keep Falcon alive and Rocket alive. That's the only moment of actual Hulk we get in the entire movie. And so there's a bit of frustration for anyone who's truly a Hulk fan. And that's where my cousin lost his crap about it, was like, come on, give me the Hulk. Because even in the final battle sequence, I think Hulk was in the background, but you don't get to truly see, he should be just pummeling fools. There's no reason to hold back. There's no moral justification. There's no pacifist angle for that. He should just be like, this is the right thing to do to save the world.
The obvious reason as to why the Hulk isn't doing that is because the Hulk could thrash Thanos one-on-one when he has no Infinity Stones, right? it would have been a very boring end.
But
if
even
Hulk just got in there and just killed him.
So Hulk could not. Right? Hulk lost to Thanos with Thanos having just basic Thanos. So that was going to happen regardless. But in the end sequence, right, you could still have Hulk destroying all of Thanos' guard coming in, right? All of the masses he brought in of people, you could have had Hulk jumping through the air, smashing some of the big flying creatures down to the earth, like the original Hulk scene in Avengers, where he says, my secret is I'm always angry, and turns and just straight punches the heck out of one of the flying beasts right in and just makes it crumple like a shrimp right in that moment. Give me that again. Let me know it's still the Hulk, just smart. Be tactician about it. So that was a piece that was a missed opportunity, in my opinion. That it was like they could have done so much more with it. Babs is saying it's a missed opportunity, but to put Professor Hulk in the Hulkbuster armor, there's so many things you could have done with that would have been so good. And so that was a missed piece. That was one of the big complaints I've heard from people that love the Hulk.
What would be really cool was to see both the Hulk and the Hulkbuster armor like working together.
That's what Babs and
that would be awesome.
Zyra is bringing up, is that idea that you could have blended it and done more with it. Another complaint or concern they had is just in general that Captain Marvel was too powerful. That, didn't exist throughout the film, and then conveniently, at the moment when Thanos is like, let's go Braveheart on this and just kill everybody, because that's another throwback they say is kind of the same scene where it's like, bombard everyone. Well, you'll kill our troops. Yeah, but you'll kill theirs too. Is the idea that Thanos knew he would live through the bombardment, so he's just like, kill everyone, I don't care. That at that exact moment, Captain Marvel comes from wherever in the universe she might have been to just, shoulder check the ship and break through it.
That was pretty smart, though, because, and I agree, of course it's very convenient.
Convenient, that's my concern, convenient.
Right? It is incredibly convenient, and don't get me wrong, maybe it could have been done a little more elegantly, but I think it makes sense because they were also highlighting something else, another really powerful character, which is the Scarlet Witch, right? She was beating Thanos.
Well,
she almost killed Thanos.
The joy there, and this is where they at least avoided the misstep potential of Captain Marvel, because one of the concerns is with the MCU and what Disney's doing is that they know a lot of the old cast is retiring after this. They don't want to play these characters anymore. They're done. Tony Stark, absolutely. Downey Jr., he's played the character for a decade plus, is done, right? And so they're like, I'm over this. And so with this, and I was mistaking things earlier, 10 years that they've been doing this, but that they're afraid that they were kind of too conveniently handing it to the new cadre, to the new people coming in a way that, honestly, in my opinion, Captain Marvel, Brie Larson as an actress, have not earned their place in the MCU yet. That even the Captain Marvel movie was a bit of a retcon with some of the ideas to make her feel more important than she really was from any of the other movies previous. And so it just felt, again, convenient that, hey, we know actors are going to want to stop playing this role, so let's now just suddenly introduce all these new characters and let's go with that as our future whatever we're going to do. It's fine to do, but I was afraid they were going to do more so. And the nice thing, and where I'm like, thank God they didn't go further with it. Yes, she was pivotal in the changing of the balance of the fight by taking out Thanos' ship. But when she went toe-to-toe with Thanos, he beat her punk butt down. Because that was where I was okay with her ego getting checked. That she thought, oh, I'm bad butt and I can just do anything. Toe-to-toe with Thanos in his heyday prior to, that she was going, but then he did the smart thing, right? He pulled the power gem from his gauntlet to put it in one hand when she was holding it. I
love that.
And then just boom, her. And I was like, thank you. Thank you for checking that character. Because otherwise it was a little too convenient how powerful they made her. So that was my part where I thought they were going to an end of like, but they were okay with it. And so that was a piece that like, yeah. And yes, Babs, you're right. They were kind of like, they announced it when all the guns flew up to say what's going to happen. It was just the timing of that whole scene where everything else is happening. And then out of nowhere, from wherever in the universe, Captain Marvel shows up. Weak.
I wouldn't say it was weak. I think it was a good way of controlling an extremely powerful character. Maybe it could have done maybe more elegantly, but I think it was overall
that's the key, right? Or they
such a powerful character.
Well, but they could have shown some scene where at least she was aware of that was happening. Because the challenge I have is she was so beside everything else in the story that it was like she just suddenly showed up. It was like she was shoehorned in versus a natural progression.
This film was probably about 5 days in length, and they had to trim it down. right? That's what would have happened.
Perhaps. That was just a piece where I was like, boom. But I was happy at the end that they didn't go further with it. Because there was concern initially that she was going to be the pivotal moment of what actually ended the whole fight. And if they had done that, I'd have been pissed. And in essence, what I appreciate is the way they did do it. I thought played and paid homage to the whole struggle and challenge and the buildup of the whole series that's led up to this movie. You know, and the biggest spoiler of all there, right, that it ends with Iron Man. It ends with Tony Stark fixing everything, right? Because if they had done anyone else, it would have been crap, and I would have said, F you. The fact that they were able to tie it back to Tony and make it meaningful and matter was brilliant.
So another controversy. I heard some people saying that they were quite mad that Black Widow's death, because she sacrifices herself and doesn't come back.
There's a whole other piece to that.
Yeah, that the controversy that she wasn't mourned at the end that much, whereas Iron Man got his own like special funeral.
Yeah,
was,
the whole thing with it. Yeah.
But I actually think that makes perfect sense because she was a spy. She wasn't supposed to be well known. She's supposed to be secretive, and her death, nobody really knew much about the circumstances of it. It's supposed to be.
It would have been only
secret.
the closest. Well, and it was interesting because the joke about that scene is the convenience again in plot that they happened to send two characters that had emotions for each other specifically to go get the soul gem, which is kind of like, how did they know at that time that you had to sacrifice someone to get it? Because they didn't. But guess what?
The convenience factor is always the
that's the thing,
Strange, right? That's the convenience factor.
You can argue back to why it works is because of that. And what's very interesting is Babs brings it up there about the fact that there's going to be a movie that is starring Black Widow coming up.
Right.
But she dead. And she dead not in the way of Snap bring her back dead. She dead because she sacrificed Soul Stone. But there's a point to that as well. Because both she and Vision potentially exist in this separate realm, which is the Infinity Stone Soul realm. Forget the official name of it. But it's the same place that when Thanos goes through the process, sees the young Gamora, in the sense that it's in the soul realm. And so their souls exist in that piece. And so it'll be interesting to see, but there's a potential they could bring it back through that. There's going to be a whole discussion about what does Disney go forward with the franchise as they've kind of splintered things out. We'll see. But yeah, so all that occurs. That's one of the convenient things. There's a convenient moment in the big end sequence where all the girls get together and they have their girl power moment that when you think logically of the fight. No, and that's the thing. That shrug that you give, Ken, is appropriate. It's convenient for the scene they wanted to portray of a girl power moment, which is fine. But when you think to the logic of the fight that's occurring, makes no sense. That of all those different pieces that's happening.
Such a small scene that I don't give a crap, right?
And so it's a throwaway complaint, but it's just another example where they did a few things that were a bit convenient. For
me, there are.
That's what I'm saying. It's throwaway. It doesn't matter. It's just convenient. And a theme of some things that were convenient.
It's 2 seconds of film time that would satisfy probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So, great. Okay.
Yeah.
It's no, what was the phrase? Dust off my, whatever.
It's no sweat off your brow. It's no, nothing off your shoulder and stuff like that. But yeah, no, it's dust off your shoulder. It's sweat off your brow. It's no big deal. But it is a moment. I just say that because there were several things that were convenient in the movie, and that was one. In general, with the time travel, there's always challenges with it as a whole, but those are some of the main complaints I've seen. There are people that talk about the overall, how does the timeline tie in? I believe I have answers for most of that. From a lot of the spoiler things I've seen, smarter people than I, geekier geeks than I, have shown that. But there's also other throwback things that are just so good that they spent time in the movie like highlighting comic books for legitimate things. That it wasn't just that they came up with this for this movie. They were referencing back to comics that have come out in the past that talked about these things. And so everything from like Rocket Raccoon's suit that he was wearing was a cover of a very specific comic series. It was right off of it. That,
nice.
Yeah, no, these are in that video I showed. They talk about a bunch of these. That, again, the music played and stuff like that, but that even at the end credit kind of thing or afterwards where Thor and the Guardians of the Galaxy get together and kind of Thor makes the comment of, the Asgardians of the Galaxy. That was a comic that actually happened in a short sequence the Asgardians of the Galaxy. And so it was all throwing back to real things that exist in the Marvel Universe, and how I give so much credit to the creators of this movie that they really went top-notch in making this movie a glorious thing from the culmination of the movies they created, as well as just a ultimate fan service of anything you could want to have. Right? They just did so good. All right. We'll see if we go past the end, but the other thing that is definitely something to bring up is that fight sequence.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, it's so good. So, that fight sequence, just before the fight
who
sequence
else,
happens,
male or female, has a huge nerd boner just thinking about that fight sequence, right?
So, just to set the scene, right? Hulk is underneath that big...
they somehow survived the barrage. Yes,
building,
Hulk saved it.
And there's a few characters that
Hawkeye
are down.
running
Most
away
of them
from
are,
some
like,
of... the
most people are still dead and stuff, and all that's left is Captain America just standing there, and that's going to be a
so you have two moments, right? You have a moment where they've done the fight, but in the sequence, Tony Stark has been able to finally do... Well, actually, it wasn't Tony Stark, it was the Hulk, right?
Yeah.
Prior to the bombardment, Hulk was able to perform the snap.
Yes. So he
right?
brought back everybody.
And so does the snap, it takes away from him, it physically hurts him, which if you watch through the sequence, his arm is broke the rest of everything, and is smaller, it is broken, it's in a cast the rest of the movie and stuff like that, because the Hulk suffered for it. But does the snap to bring everybody back, like to undo what Thanos has done across all of reality. So he manages to do that, and then Thanos just bombards. And it's a beautiful scene where we get Thanos from Infinity Gauntlet Thanos from the previous movies, where he had the gems and thus was just literally took the armor off because he has the gems, to now prior top of his game Thanos realizes through the time mechanics and through that network stream between Gamora future and Gamora past, where he's able to see and find out that about the Infinity Stones, does a branch of the timeline because he comes through a time portal that Gamora is able to establish, and is in full fighting Thanos mode and ready to go at it, right? And so they do the snap, everyone theoretically is back, and I'll admit that the movie actually caught me off guard where I forgot kind of what that really meant, because you're dealing with that moment scene at the time where they're fighting just to stay alive. Thanos is just sitting there saying, bring me the gems, and has a moment where who is left locally there start fighting, and they're just getting their butts kicked. And like you said, that culminating moment where you have Captain America, the last standing Avenger, standing there, everyone else has been beat down, and you have Thanos, and Thanos is like, you know what, I've changed my mind, I'm no longer going to get rid of half of the reality, I'm going to kill everybody and start over with a new universe. And you're like, oh boy, stakes have been raised, this is bad. And Thanos calls down his entire bombardment of creatures who all fly down, and all of what we saw at the end of Infinity War, essentially all of those creatures again coming forth without the support of Wakanda and being done in, with Black Panther and all that. It's just Captain America and beat up everybody else. What a moment. What a scene of like, what is going to happen? You have Thor beat down, almost dead, Fat Thor trying to fight, but also beat down. It is left to just Cap, right? Just like, ah!
And that's the thing. I love that he's already broken and beaten by Thanos at this point, but he climbs up. He's already like a dying man, and he gets up and he's like, "Nope, I am going to do this. I don't care if I die. I don't care if it's meaningless. I don't care if I lose. I am going to die fighting this cause." And I think that is a very key thing, because he has become a very worthy person at that stage, I would say, because he has shown that he would die for a greater good, right? Even a losing cause of a greater good, he would sacrifice himself for, which it just says wonders about his character.
Oh, it goes back to like when they beheaded Thanos, I was concerned because I love Brolin's depiction of him, and I was afraid we weren't going to get Thanos in the movie. And then we did because of the time loop, and we get such a good Thanos. Like a non-conflicted, I'm just going to beat people and win Thanos that I just, so appreciated. And everybody who's seen it knows the scene, because now you have Captain America standing there like, well, this is going to suck. No way I'm going to win. And then you get the moment. And you get the scene where all of a sudden you hear, on your left. And it's a throwback again to the previous movies, right?
Yeah.
Because it's Falcon, or it's going back to not Brody, but Falcon, basically, right? I think it's the Falcon one, where when he was running by him on the around the mall and stuff like that, and he's like on your left and stuff, and you turn, and all of a sudden you get a scene of all these portals being whizzed into existence from Doctor Strange, again showing like his level of power. And it turns into this, what was already this great action scene, to the most epic, everyone you ever hoped to exist fight scene of Marvel history, where everybody they have introduced in the entire MCU through every movie is there, minus the handful of people that Thanos straight up killed. That everyone who got snapped comes into existence in one place. Everyone from Wakanda with Black Panther and Bucky and all of them, to the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Ravagers and all of them, to all the living as Guardians, and to like just all of the other Guardians and all the other magicians from Doctor Strange. Anyone who hadn't been killed otherwise is suddenly there. All these portals open. You have Wakanda's ships coming through fighting against Thanos' ships. You have everyone on the ground, so you kind of get that same Infinity War fight, but now with more, with all the heroes.
Before we get into the actual fight, right? That's all the lineup. So Captain America was standing alone. He's walking towards this beautiful scene of just this interminable army in front of him, and he walks forward towards it, and then Doctor Strange's circles appear. They all come out, and at that point they're like running towards each other. There's literally like people on, like it's like it almost looks like a historical painting of grandeur and epic level, because it's like there's what's it called? What do you call it? Pegasus?
Pegasus, yes. Pegasus, right? That people, Valkyrie lasers, was on her Pegasus swords, and stuff, yeah.
There's magic powers, everything, all like you couldn't possibly have anything. There's time travel. It's like it all comes together into this one scene of fighting. It's like, how is this even happening? It's just insane that they engineered such a battle like this. And when you see them coming together, I thought to myself, that's why people keep saying to me there's no end credit scene, because the film here is going to end, and there's actually going to be another film after it. But it'll come and say, "Don't tell anyone." That's what it's going to be. That's what I was genuinely. I was 100% I was sold. I was like, okay, that's what's going to happen.
Yes,
it looked like that was the end of the film. I was like, oh my god, it's just beginning.
It is so good because we get this beautiful setup of the most epic battle you're ever going to hope is about to happen. Right? Like you said, the lineup is there. They have this standoff moment. There's some jokes, and I equally recommend, if you've seen the movie, to go see the Screen Rant version. That is the one I love. Crud. The plot one, where it's the pitch meeting. Pitch meeting for Avengers Endgame is hilarious.
Oh, it's funny. That's
so good.
Earlier, right? Can you imagine the producers talking
right, because they do bring up some of the plot holes, but they're not that bad compared to other things in it. So it's just like, so, oh my god. And all right, so we then get this battle, and it just goes epic. Everyone's going nuts, and there's moments in there that literally made the audience around me cheer. One of those, which everybody saw, is when Thor is about to be killed, right? And I don't remember if this is the epic battle or the prior to it battle, but in that battle, I think it's the prior to the epic. All of a sudden, Thor is down. Through the sequence that's going on, there's a moment where he's got both Mjolnir and his new axe. I forget the name of the new one. And he's fighting Thanos, doing good, but still gets smacked. And then coming back from it, he's about to get killed by Thanos. And out of nowhere, Mjolnir comes flying in and just smacks Thanos, right? And you're like, what? What? And Babs, you said this earlier because you're like, who threw the hammer? What? Where did this come through? Thank you, Stormbreaker. And you're just like, what could it be? And you turn and you see Cap standing there in his glory, having just done the arc, his hand forward, and you're like, holy crap, he's worthy.
Yeah.
And next thing you know...
So you said you don't know, you think it was before. This was definitely during the battle.
Was it during the... Well, it continued into... I forget if that scene was in that battle or the previous, or when you first get that moment of like epic holy crud.
that's why I think that he's worthy now, is because he knew he was going to die. He made that accepted, so I'm going to go and fight anyway. That's why my word choice earlier of that's when I think he was really truly worthy, was because after then it clicked, right? He became that.
Well, it goes into that
man
in the past and stuff that he had gotten humbled, right? That prior to that he was Cap, he was leading, but after all the struggles in the world and having to do the focus groups and all the thing of the suffering over the 5 years, he's finally become humble, which is the same thing Thor had to do before he was worthy. He had to become humble. Yeah. And so it was just like, yar, right? It was so good. Now, I will say that's another controversial point because, and I give my cousin credit for bringing this up, I was also totally cool with him wielding the hammer.
Oh, yeah.
A bit not as cool with him wielding lightning. Because
that's a bit dumb.
That was Thor's thing.
It comes with Mjolnir. Whatever.
Well, that was Thor's thing, though, right? Because Thor showed he was able to channel lightning without Mjolnir.
Yeah.
And he's the thunder god. And so that was a piece that I think they could have done the same exact scene without him having lightning ability. And I think it would have been better for just lore and all that.
Yeah, take away from Thor. I noticed they couldn't fly, which is interesting because I thought it was Mjolnir that let him fly originally.
Yes, because initially the way Thor flew is he spun it and threw the hammer but held onto it. Thus flight. And so regardless, right? But it's a thing and that, but that was probably my biggest disappointment with that piece. And so I just don't, and that was the thing. And Babs, in a way, yes, certain versions of Thor, there are versions of Thor in the comics that Mjolnir and the ability to turn into Thor was all about the hammer. Everything came with it, where it was a human on Earth who wielded Mjolnir and became Thor. But in this MCU, in the world that we're presented, Thor is a god unto himself, and Mjolnir is just a tool. And so when he gets Stormbreaker, he has a more powerful tool. And thus, I think it doesn't really fit. But that comes from my cousin. That comes from Hostile Prey. And once he mentioned it and talked about it, I was kind of like, I can actually agree with that criticism. Not a big deal.
Yeah,
just
totally,
a piece.
Totally.
Because at the same time, when he did throw the hammer and when lightning came, everybody in the theater lost their crap. In my theater,
it was such a good scene. That's like a minor point, right?
Yeah,
it was such a good scene that you can't.
This is the pick apart.
I was hyperventilating, right? Like, I only do this like a couple times a year in like the geekiest, most enjoyable books usually that I'm reading. But this is it was just like, oh my god, because it's a callback to it must have been one of the original Avengers films where so they're all sitting around a room, all drinking together, right? And they're having a good time. And,
it's at the end. Was it the one where it's at the end and they're having shawarma? And essentially, it was that like that.
And they're in the Avengers headquarters, and they're all standing around drinking and having and chilling out and stuff. And Thor's hammer's just sitting there.
Oh no, that's the beginning of Age of Ultron, or that's in that scene, right? Because so you get the moment
they're drinking and they're eating and stuff, and they're chilling out, and they're sort of celebrating a win that they had or something. And they're all like, so they start talking about the mechanics of Mjolnir. They're like, so. What does this worthy mean? And then Tony Stark gets all his Iron Man.
Well, because they're drinking. Everybody's trying to pull it up. Like whatever.
Interestingly, Natasha does not try it. Actually, she stays away, which is I think an interesting point.
Well, she's also no. Natasha knows she's not worthy. She has so many skeletons in her.
I don't know.
No, she has yet. At that point, she's yet to fully embrace that she could be. She is still doubting herself, and she's still wondering if she's even worthy of being in the community that is the Avengers. Because she constantly has that throwback of like, but my past, I'm not a good person. She's making amends, but that's the thing, right? But the idea, what we all loved about that scene. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, let me see it. You got to see the captain.
I know. No, go ahead.
So they're all standing around. They're all trying it. Iron Man tries his with the thrusters, and Natasha doesn't get to try it. Hulk tries it, and you're like, oh, that could be an interesting one. Nope, can't budge it. And even later on, we know that he can't budge it. It's on his chest and stuff, and he can't move it.
Yeah.
So then Captain goes over. Cap tries it, and he goes over. He touches it. He's like squeezing with all his might, and it shifts just slightly, like an inch. But you see, it zooms into Thor's face, and he's sort of like sitting there laughing, like
he's in the background,
And he sees it move, and you just see him go.
He has the briefest moment of concern, the briefest moment of like, my place in the world. Because if Cap had picked it up, he'd have been totally undone, right? Like because the only other person who does in that sequence is Vision, because Vision's essentially pure. In that sense, the later Vision picks it up like nothing. But that moment with Cap is so beautiful because Cap is, in many ways, just such a honest and pure being to have that happen is like, yes, right?
It's just so righteous and fair, right? And plus, it gives Cap not only the character building and everything, which is all great in itself. It also gives him a bit of power that's kind of needed, because up until then he's just a strong dude. He's just a particularly good guy with endurance and strength, and that's about it. And some military training and stuff, right? But so that really gives him another feather in his cap, which I think is really needed as well.
Another sparkle on his shield.
I think we could continue this discussion forevermore, but I do need to head.
I know it's one of these that this is fun, and I'm happy to keep this conversation going. You're welcome to bring it up in our Reddit posts on ShowX, to message us directly. I'd love to hear more of what you guys think. I appreciate Babs, Zoraro, and Newmass, everybody for chatting in the chat today on Twitch to converse with us about it. Because for me, anyone who's seen it, I've heard one or two people try to say they disliked it for what I've figured were silly reasons. And when I talked to them, I was able to dissuade them or come up with, well, but here's why that happened. You might have missed this about how they're dealing with time in the MCU, and I've been able to give them the answers that they were kind of like, oh. They weren't willing to say like, well, now I like it, but they had to reevaluate. Where for me, you can hear it, hopefully, anyone out there listening that hasn't seen it, in Ken and Mai's emotion, and maybe hopefully you've had the similar experience. This has been a great culmination to the ride that has been the MCU. It's going to continue on.
It is one of the. So I said it before, and I've been saying it to a lot of people this week, and they've been getting annoyed at me. In fact, somebody said even better than Lord of the Rings. But I think that this is the one that this is probably my favorite series of films of all time.
Yeah. No, this is. It's so good. It's so clean. They did such a good job. And, like, I have friends, Babs saying he's going to see it again. I have friends who cosplay and do stuff through this who are seeing it for the third time tonight. This is one of those movies I need to see in the theater. In fact, I need to go to, like, the IMAX and see it because there's so much happening in certain scenes. I'm tearing up again just in my joy of the emotion from it because it was such a good job. When they did the end sequence and the credits, and there's something to say there, right? The credit but not end credit, because they have the funeral in the end, and there's people that missed out even on some of the characters that were at the funeral. The idea that the kid shown in it that nobody recognized was likely the kid that was in Iron Man 3 that helped him rebuild the armor. And it speaks to, seriously, that is one of the, right? It's such another one of the big potentials, because it could very well be that kid. That we had Pepper in her, I forget the rescue armor or something, in the scenes with her and Iron Man, that his daughter gets to talk to Happy at the end about, I love cheeseburgers, yeah, your dad always did too, and like so many good moments, and even the funeral sequence that we know more's happening, right? That we get Thor with the Guardians of the Galaxies going off. There's got to be another movie with them. That
I love that, and I thought that whole scene was so funny. With Thor going like, oh, we know you're the captain, of course.
And yeah, it's just all of those things that are just in there. That at the very end sequence, that you don't get a true like after sequence, but you get one of the most elegant like end sequence things in the credits, where you have the original Avengers come together and sign their credit out versus just a listing of the credits that is personal for each of them. Did you watch that portion of it? Because in the credits,
my whole theater left because
there was
no end credits.
Well, in the credits, so even though you didn't get a true end credit scene, you got the credits where each of the main characters, so Tony Stark, right, so Robert Downey Jr., they have their signature, and it's just them, and it's a sequence of their shadow of their character, them signing their character out in the credits. It's so elegant. Sweet. That was last done in essentially Star Trek 6, the Undiscovered Country, or whatever it was, where the original cast of Star Trek did the same thing after doing so many movies, where they signed themselves out. And so that was so just nice in that sequence. And then you got that tease at the very end, which was the sound of hammering. At the very end, which you missed, Ken, where in transition between, instead of a sequence, you had a ding, 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 happening right as it transitioned from those sequence of signatures into the regular credits. That when people are saying, what was that sound? It was, as many better nerds than me have done, the actual hammering sound from the original Iron Man, when he made the first Zero suit, the first beta suit of Iron Man in the cave. is that exact sound. And so take it as you will, but either it's just tying a bow on the entire story arc that has been from Iron Man 1 to the end of Endgame of the 22 movies, end it where you began, or a lead in to, again, another throwback to the potential of that kid becoming potentially another Iron Man.
I'd be happy to see his daughter become Iron Man, to be honest.
There's other thoughts with that. There's the whole point that, like, old man Captain America that came back after resetting all the stones is straight off the comics. That they had old man Iron Man. That him passing the shield on to Falcon is straight out of the comics, because there's a point where he did that, and there's another point where Bucky had been Iron Man for a period as well. All of that ties together, and it's all straight out of the dang comics.
I would like to see
so
Bucky
good.
become Iron Man. Bucky kind of sucks in my opinion.
I hate Bucky. I hate Bucky to no end. He's my least favorite god. I hate him so much. But yeah, so all of those things are potential aspects of what they did with this. And we know going forward that we've got a Loki series coming out to Disney Plus. We know that we're supposed to have a potential Vision and Scarlet Witch series coming out. Just all of those and such, right? There's so many things that are potentially
I'm so excited for them all, dude.
Happening.
It's such an exciting time to be alive for us geeks, isn't it? It's just such a beautiful set of stuff
Dude,
coming
it's
out.
so good. It's so good. I am so happy with it all. These are, to me, have all been brilliant. All right. It is time for us to go. I appreciate you guys dealing with our level of for this. Thank you for listening to Show X today. There's news and other things we could have got to, but this is our opportunity to finally gush about what, Marvel and Disney have done. So,
Babs had a great suggestion in the chat there. Game of Thrones next?
So I can't because I don't know anything Game of Thrones. I follow the memes because I have not been watching. But if we want to bring that up, I'm okay.
3, but I think that'd be quite fun if we caught up and then talked how to Game of Thrones.
We would need more people on that know Game of Thrones have been watching it than us.
That's true.
Because we are not caught up. I've seen memes because I have friends who cosplay and love it, so I know kind of what's happened, but I don't know it. And so I can't do it, but I do like the idea. All right, guys, we got to go. Ken, could you lead us out?
You have been listening to ShowX live on VtWShowX.com. Thank you for checking us out. Follow us on Twitch. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook. Find us on Patreon and send us an email. So you can find all these links in the notes. And you know them all. Just Google ShowX VTW and you'll find us everywhere anyway. If not, it's VtWShowX on most places. Where it's not, it's ShowX. You'll find it all. I'm going quick because we're 20 minutes over time. Thank you so much.
And we didn't take a break.
Show, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to keep email us in, get on our Reddit, talk to us more. We're happy to do it. You may see us briefly in the Discord after this, but we got to go. So thank you, everybody, and we will catch you again. I won't be on next week. The show may or may not be, but we'll see how it goes. But we'll let you know, and thank you very much. So with that, we're out of here. Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend. Happy Mother's Day. All of that. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. See you in the next zombie.
Bye, wait.